Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Place Overview and Scrutiny panel on Tuesday, the 10th of June. Our first item on the agenda this evening is to elect a chair for the municipal year 2025-26. Could I please have any nominations for chair from the panel? Councillor Martin.
Could I nominate Councillor Gary Reeves, please?
Do I have a seconder for that nomination? Councillor Blundell. Are there any other nominations for chair? No. That confirms Councillor Reeves as the chair for the 2025-26 municipal year. If we move on to the vice chair now, can I please have nominations for vice chair? Councillor Reeves.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Helen Taylor for vice chair. I think she brings great amount of experience from also experience on the planning panel and also with the people ONS as well. So I think that'd be a great addition and great value. So yeah, that's my nomination.
Do we have a seconder for that nomination?
Second.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And are there any other nominations for vice chair? No. Okay, that confirms Councillor Taylor as vice chair for the 2025-26 municipal year. If we just take a quick pause now to invite Councillor Reeves as chair up to the front dais, and we'll go through the formal introductions. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, and welcome to this meeting of the Place Overview and Scrutiny panel on the 10th of June, 2025. My name is Councillor Reeves, and I'll be chairing this meeting. So this meeting is being held in person via Zoom and streamed live to the public on YouTube. I remind all attendees that participation in the meeting indicates consent to the audio and video being streamed live, and acknowledgement that after the meeting, it will continue to be available in the public domain. We're not expecting the fire alarm to sound this evening. However, if it does, please may I ask you to leave in an orderly fashion and rendezvous across the road outside the library next to the fountain. Hopefully we won't get wet because of the fountain. Firstly, it would be useful if all voting members and officers could introduce themselves so that the public are aware of who is in the meeting and the role they're undertaking. So I'll begin with myself. So Councillor Reeves, I'm the chair, and councillor for the Cox Green ward. And if I could then invite the vice chair and then the other panel members next, please.
Councillor Helen Taylor, vice chair, and councillor for Oldfield.
Member of the panel.
Councillor Alison Carpenter, voting member of the panel.
Councillor Blundell, voting member of the panel, member for Hurley and the Walthams.
Councillor Gurch Singh, voting member of the panel.
Councillor Charles Martin, voting member of the panel, Belmont ward.
Mark Bealey, Principal Democratic Services Officer for Overview and Scrutiny.
Chloe Plummer, Democratic Services Officer. I'm observing.
Good evening, everyone. Amanda Gregory. I'm the Assistant Director for Housing and Public Protection.
Hello, I'm Rian Richards. I'm the Environmental Health Services Manager.
Good evening all. My name is James Thorpe. I'm the Service Lead for Sustainability and Climate here at Royal Borough.
Hello there, I'm Simon Werner. I'm the leader of the council and a non-voting member of the panel.
Rest of the meeting participants do not speak unless I specifically invite you to do so. Once I have invited you to speak, before you do so, please state your name and the capacity in which you are speaking, if appropriate. I'll also ask officers to speak at appropriate times as well and come to you for answers and as part of the discussion. If any individual attempts to disrupt the meeting, I am able to use my powers in the Constitution to adjourn the meeting or have the individual removed. I would also like to remind councillors that really to improve our time and effectiveness as a committee, I'd ask if you could please limit the repetition of points and questions which have already been raised by others. But of course, if you need more detail, then of course, contribute further. Where possible, please put forward all new points or questions which you would like raised during your request to speak. We will now start with the agenda items. Do we have any apologies or absences, please?
Yes, Chair, received 2 apologies from our co-optees, Levain Keane and Bronnie Latif.
Thank you. Okay, and so the next item on the agenda is item 4. Any declarations of interest from the panel members at all? Okay. Then item number 5 is the minutes. So to consider and approve the minutes from the meeting that was held on the 1st of April. Are we able to agree to them and sign them off? Everyone, okay, thank you. And then takes us to our first of the big agenda items that we've got come here to discuss, that we obviously scoped during our previous meeting. So it's really good to have this brought before us at the next meeting possible. That's the Environment and Climate Strategy Impact Report. Should I give some? We'll just hand it over to you. Okay. I was wondering whether to give some background, but I'll just hand it over to you, James, and then you can take that pleasure and introduce it for us, please.
Thank you, Chair. As I said earlier, my name is James Thorpe. I'm the Service Lead for Sustainability and Climate Change here at the Royal Borough. I have got a presentation just to provide some context and some of the highlights that I'll run through. And obviously you have seen a copy of the Climate Impact Report in your agenda pack. Next slide, please. So I wanted just to provide some of the headline achievements. Obviously we've been working on this document for around 5 years now. The council declared a climate emergency in 2019, I believe it was, and published its climate strategy in 2020. Since then, the council has reduced its carbon emissions by 33.46% between our baseline year of 2018-19 and 23-24. We are waiting the government's new carbon emission factors to update that, but we will update that this summer. And it is reported in the quarterly assurance report, so that will be made public over the next few months. In terms of the borough's emissions, they have reduced by 18.6% between 2018 and 2022. 2022, you may be slightly curious as to why it's 2025 and we're still talking about 2022. These figures are collated by government and they have a 2-year lag. Again, we are due the new figures from government this summer, but the latest available figures are from 2022. The 18.6% reduction is the largest in Berkshire and puts us in the top 10% nationally in terms of borough-wide carbon emissions, which is clearly very positive. In terms of some of the stuff that's happened on the ground, many of you that have used and visit Ockwells often will have noticed, I'm sure, there are 30,000 more trees in the ground. These have been planted since 2020 with the help of business, community groups and residents. We work very closely with lots of different groups. And just last week, we had a group from Centrica, a local business, out doing some tree care on those trees to make sure they succeed. The climate partnership that was set up a few years ago, recognising that the council alone can't make all the change needed to tackle the climate emergency, was recently recognised as a best practice example nationally by the Climate Emergency UK. Climate Emergency UK are the people that pull together the climate scorecards, council climate scorecards, if you've seen those, which is nice to have that recognition of something that we are absolutely leading the way on. Next slide, please, Mark. I'm not sure this is widely known by lots of people, but all council purchased electricity comes from renewable sources. That includes streetlights, that includes schools maintained by the council, that includes this building, car parks, etc., etc. So we have made a commitment to buying 100% renewable energy, and we continue to do that through our energy procurement frameworks. One of the achievements last year was the adoption of the Sustainability SPD, which has put in place ambitious planning guidance, and we have also have a dedicated officer that is there that looks at planning applications to make sure that they follow the Sustainability SPD. We're the only borough in Berkshire that has a recently adopted Sustainability SPD. So again, our planning guidance is right at the forefront of the area. One of the things we've spent quite a bit of time doing is securing funding to undertake the work to decarbonise our estate. Over £3 million has been secured from government through a variety of different schemes, things like the Public Sector Decarbonisation Scheme, to fund those improvements. Those improvements aren't just about decarbonisation though. What we do is we reduce the operational and maintenance costs by taking out end-of-life boilers, lighting, etc., and putting in new things. It reduces our operational maintenance costs and it makes facilities better. If you've been into, say, a classroom that has old lighting and one that has new lighting, they are a completely different learning environment. We've also secured nearly £1 million from government to roll out 750 EV charge points over the next 10 years. So again, a big investment in that decarbonisation, enabling our residents to access those, to hopefully charge their EVs. Next slide, please, Mark. I wanted to give you a bit of background or a bit of context as to what sustainability is at the council. Sustainability, or the sustainability team, is actually made up of these 5 different areas. I'll start at the top, why not? Flood risk is an area that is very important to residents. We do a huge amount of work to ensure our highways drain properly. We're working with the Environment Agency actively in the east of the borough and looking at protections we can put in place there. There are obviously clear links to climate change and flood risk, and therefore we think flood risk as part of the team makes a huge amount of sense. We have the energy team. In its simplest form, it is about buying our energy and paying the bills associated with that. But the work they do it goes much further in terms of identifying high consumption and unusual consumption patterns, delivering those projects that we've just talked about in terms of decarbonisation and improving those facilities, managing or coordinating the climate partnership, and that work on the SPD. We have our ecology team, and I'll talk a little bit about this later, on a bit more detail later, but we have 2 full-time ecologists that sit within the team who will look at planning applications. They will look at around 80 a month. So wherever we have concerns around protections for nature, the ecology team will have a look at that and will provide advice to our planning officers to make sure that we're achieving the best possible outcomes. We have our natural environment team. We have some really rather beautiful nature reserves across the borough, things like Battlemead, Ockwells, Berwick. We have our Berwick Nature Centre as well. And the natural environment team are there to manage those sites, manage them for nature, manage them for people, and achieve that balance, whilst also doing some really fantastic engagement work with lots of different community members, businesses, as I said earlier. They also lead the work we do on the local nature recovery strategy. And again, I'll talk about that later. Also recently joined the team is our infrastructure planning team. So again, we want to make sure the infrastructure we're putting in place in the borough is sustainable. So the work they do has been brought into the team so we can make sure we are covering that off as well. In terms of the link into the council plan, you can see there that strategic priority 2.2 is about protecting and improving the environment and those green spaces, reducing carbon emissions and increasing biodiversity. This is something that is right in there as one of our strategic priorities as a council, and I think that demonstrates the commitment the council has made to dealing with or playing its part in tackling the climate emergency. Next slide, please, Mark. So I've just said about what the sustainability team do, but I would be wrong in assuming that we do it all. We are there, but there are teams across the council that are doing important work on sustainability. I've got some examples here. This is certainly not everyone, but I thought I'd provide some examples. So some of the work we're doing with public health on joint campaigns to do with healthy eating and food waste, and the work we're doing to embed sustainability into the health and wellbeing strategy. And the flip of that is, as we start looking ahead to a new environment climate strategy, how we can consider health and wellbeing in that. We work closely with our planning colleagues. I've alluded already to the work we've done on the sustainability SPD to develop that guidance, but we are also a consultee on ecology, as lead local flood authority, highways, development control, biodiversity net gain, and the SPD. So whenever a planning application comes in, it's highly likely that one, if not many members of the sustainability team will be providing comments and advice back to our planning officers. We have procurement. Two recent examples, the bus services tender led by our transport team and the leisure centre tender led by our leisure team, all had sustainability as a scored criteria within it. And I know the work that is happening in on the grounds maintenance contract that's going to be procured over the next year has been widely consulted on. We recognise that when we're buying things, we need to make sure we're embedding sustainability into that. And therefore, we work closely with our procurement colleagues and colleagues across the council to make sure that sustainability is embedded into those procurement exercises. And I won't go around the whole loop, but to finish on HR, we've been rolling out carbon literacy training with their support to officers and to members to make sure that we've got the skills across the organisation to tackle the climate emergency. And in all staff terms and conditions, there is a section on sustainability to make sure people realise that it is everyone's job to tackle sustainability. Next slide, please, Mark. Thank you. I also just wanted to highlight again how, even as RBWM, we are not working within ourselves, we're outward looking, and we work with lots of different organisations, not just in the borough, but across Berkshire to achieve some really good outcomes. The council is the responsible authority for the local nature recovery strategy. This is a mandatory statutory document that government have asked counties to do. We put ourselves forward to take that lead because we think there's a real opportunity there to shape that and develop it for nature recovery. We piloted solar together, a collective solar purchasing scheme. We were the first borough in Berkshire to take that on, and following its success, we work with other Berkshire councils to roll that out across the county. And we are also the officer lead for the net zero theme in the Berkshire Prosperity Board. So we take the lead and coordinate the work of climate net zero officers across the county to again achieve some really good outcomes for our residents. Next slide, please. As I alluded to in the last, or I suppose throughout this presentation, we've worked really closely with community groups across the borough for a number of years. Much of the work we have done couldn't have been done without the generosity and support of our residents and our community groups. People like Good Jim, Windsor and Maidenhead, who are out there planting trees for us or undertaking tree care or spreading chip bark to make sure our paths are accessible. People like the Eco Action Hub, who have driven forward sustainability engagement with their location in the Nicholson Centre and taken on or have a strong programme of events that they run to engage our residents. The Wilds, and I won't go through them all, but again, the Wilds have been instrumental in, again, their support for a lot of our practical conservation. We provide support in lots of different ways, whether that's through financial assistance, whether that's awareness raising using our existing communication channels, whether that's about providing advice or opportunities for action. But we would always encourage our community groups to partner with us to deliver on the climate crisis. Next slide, please, Mark. I also just wanted to highlight some of the community engagement work that we do as a team. We have a programme of engagement run out of our Berwick Nature Centre. We engage and enthuse 1,500 children each year with the natural environment. We had a school group in just today, and we have 3 or 4 groups in every week for the next 6 weeks or so. It's an incredibly busy time with children coming in. Today they were learning or making videos of nature or litter picking or whatever they wanted to do related to the environment using the iPads we have down there. Tomorrow they could be pond dipping, mini bee safarying. We have a wide variety of things that children do. And it's not just school children. We work with the guiding movement, and we have a number of groups coming in through that. And we also offer things just during half term that people can book onto and come and experience those different activities. We also provide lots of opportunities for residents to take part in practical nature conservation. And I've got some photos, I think, on the next slide of that type of thing, and I'll talk a little more to that on the next slide. And we have a growing programme of corporate volunteering activities, which supports our local businesses to give back to the community. And it also generates income for the council. So, you know, we really value the support that our corporates provide us. Next slide, please. It's a very colourful slide after some very black and white slides, but what I'll do is I'll just go around here. You can see in the top left, that's a demo or a pond dipping activity at the Berwick Nature Centre. You can see there in the top right, that's some of the team leading a plastic blitz session with Oldfield School in 2024. Bottom right, you can see some corporate volunteers planting trees at Ockwells. Some of them look very happy about it. Most of them look very happy about it, and that's very positive. In the bottom centre, that's a picture of our Dawn Chorus walk. That's when we ask people to join us very early in the morning, and we take them on a guided walk with the help of some of our local experts to help them identify the sounds you're hearing at 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. in the morning. And then in the bottom left, you can see a group there doing some orchard pruning of local residents in orchard pruning at our Ockwell site. So this is just a taste. You know, any day you go down to Berwick, there will probably be something happening to try and help our residents engage. And we know that it's not just about action on the environment here that has a positive impact. We know that getting residents out into nature has, you know, a myriad of other positive benefits, whether that's the public health and the mental health, you know, general well-being, etc. So we're very proud of the work we do with the community out of Berwick and have done for a number of years. Next slide, please, Mark. I also wanted to talk a little to the work we've been undertaking on the Climate Partnership. It was established in 2021 to bring together residents, community groups, and businesses to take action, recognising the scale of the challenge. We have lots of ways to influence things, but the scale of the challenge, I think we would all recognise is huge, and therefore we needed a bigger group of people, a broader base of people to take on that challenge. We have a steering group with members drawn from again, a myriad of different organisations bringing their own specialism and their knowledge. And you can see at the bottom there the different projects that the Climate Partnership has funded over the last year. I think importantly, the Climate Partnership also provides support and advice to make best use of the money. We don't just have an application come in and just sort of hand money out. We work with them, and our Climate Partnership Coordinator works really closely with these different groups to make sure that the applications coming in maximise our carbon savings, maximise the impact they can have. And so that's an important element. And again, having that broad steering group means that if we need to bring in a specialism from somewhere else to support a particular project, we are able to do that. Next slide, please, Mark. We've also run a number of events. Some of you may have attended the climate conference. I know Councillor Werner did in October 2024 at Windsor Racecourse. You can see that's a picture from that event. The room was packed, and I think, again, it was a really successful session. We broke out, we had sessions or breakout groups led by different people, different groups. Some of them were incredibly popular, but the feedback we've received on that day was really very good. Recently, we held a Shaping Climate Action for Businesses event at Braywick, and next month we are also working with the Youth Council to deliver a climate workshop for young people in the borough out of the Braywick Nature Centre, and that's on July the 14th in the afternoon. Next slide, please, Mark. One of the important pieces of work we've done over the last few years is establishing the Carbon Offset Fund. It's been established to secure contributions from developers to deliver carbon reduction projects. It can only be spent on carbon reduction projects. And as you can see there, that's lifted from a Section 106 document. And you can see that the wording that does ring fence that. But the money we're securing through that is being reinvested back into decarbonisation projects in the borough, whether that's the Windsor Leisure Centre project that is going to transform the heating and lighting over there, whether that's the new air source heat pump that sits on top of the Guildhall, which I think is a fantastic example of a historic building being brought up to date for the 21st century, and solar panels at the Braywick Nature Centre are just a few of the really big projects that the Carbon Offset Fund has funded. It was also recently audited, and I'm sure it will come to the appropriate panel, audit panel for review. But I can say that it was viewed as having a generally sound system, governance, risk management, and control in place for that fund. There were a few recommendations, and we have since implemented those as well. So we are pretty confident that it's in really good shape. Next slide, please, Mark. I wanted just to highlight, and I'm not going to talk in any detail about these, but I did want to highlight some of the national policy that can impact on us locally. As there is a number of different things there. I think just today we've seen big announcements on nuclear, and that will have an impact on decarbonisation of the grid, for example. We are seeing lots of stuff on house building targets. We're seeing different, I think there's a public consultation out at the moment on biodiversity net gain. So I won't go into detail because I think there's a lot of this is still to be seen as to what impact it has. But there is a number of things there that will impact on us locally, and we'll have to adapt. And of course, I believe the spending review is tomorrow, so we will look at that and see what implications there are in that for us. Final slide, please. But what I would say is that the council will continue to lobby government on this. There is just a selection over the last couple of years of different motions that this council has passed on various elements to do with the environment. We will continue to lobby government, whether that is through council or through any other means we have, to ensure that they pull all the levers they possibly can to deliver on the climate emergency. They are our team email addresses, so if you have got any questions on the different elements, they are there and available. So so please do get in touch with any member of the team.
Thanks, James, for that informative presentation as well. And obviously for putting together the report that's come before us anyway as well, for us to be able to digest prior to the meeting. And it definitely has made interesting reading as well. We can see where the success is. What I'd also like to do as part of that is also to go to our public speakers next, to ask them, and then panel members, and then we can obviously then come back to you. So our first, yeah, our first public speaker. Welcome back, Dave. Obviously you were here before when we were doing the scoping document, so I appreciate you coming back again. And I'll hand it over to you. You have 3 minutes from when you start speaking. Is it fine? Thank you.
My name's Dave Scarborough. I'm speaking on behalf of the Climate Emergency Coalition and Eco Action. Firstly, thank you, James, for mentioning Eco Action several times in the report. We do want to work much more closely with the officers to drive even more improvement. You have made some good improvements, well done. However, there are some of the targets were rather easy. I think the recycling target was achieved before the strategy was actually even approved. And the most important thing is reducing consumption. What are the actions to reduce consumption, which was stated in the circular economy aim? Some are not included because they're very hard, but so necessary. So how many new people have started their eco journey in the last year? That's really hard, but important. In the actions completed section, the document paints a rosy picture. An example: online in-store recycling map was created to support residents to access local facilities. True, great idea. But the last post was 3 years ago. I can't drive it. I can't actually get the map to show me the recycling points for anything. There's no pin for several things, e.g. blister packing. H&M as a store is mentioned, and that closed over a year ago. Batteries. What about saying what is recycled at curbside? I requested a 5th section when the strategy was being prepared, and my suggestion was not included. It was education, communication, and marketing. It's so important. Lots of people come into our Eco Action Hub and say that they are experts at recycling. That's great. Well done. You succeeded in making them passionate about recycling. Now, please make everyone passionate about all the other things necessary to save our civilization. Broadly, reduce carbon, increase nature. Please make the next version more ambitious. Make targets really meaningful and challenging. This version has reduced energy demand across buildings and assets we own and operate. Really, we need across all buildings and assets, and it needs measuring. We would also like to help other departments to make improvements. For example, some things we think would help: 20-mile-an-hour zones, promoting stop idling, no car Sundays, free bike rides, etc., etc. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dave. Appreciate that. And I think we can come to some of those notes later as well, which I'm sure we've taken down. So I'd like to go over to our second public speaker, Andrew Hill. So Andrew, you have 3 minutes from when you begin speaking. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can, yeah.
Thank you. Throughout this report, you refer to sustainability SPDs as part of the planning process, and you said that planning reinforces this document. I'd like to query that. I mean, I attend many planning meetings, and when the objectors recently raised serious concerns about breaches of the tall building SPD, the senior officer there said that the SPDs have, quote, negligible weight because RBWM is under the tilted balance. Under the tilted balance, this means that unless the harms significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits, then the application should be approved. So this begs the question, what is the point in passing important climate and sustainability related SPDs like these when in another room, planning officers say in their meetings that the SPD should be treated as having limited or negligible weight under the tilted balance? So yes, your teams are giving planning advice, but planners say it has limited weight and it's, to my mind, largely ignored. Will environmental harm ever be treated by RBWM as a harm which significantly and demonstrably outweighs the benefits under the tilted balance? What are you going to do to get planning officers to reinforce rather than undermine the work of their fellow officers in sustainability and climate? You should both pull in the same direction, not against each other. You say in this report that objective 2 is to green our towns and urban areas, meaning to construct development to improve the environmental performance and reduce its environmental impact. You say you want to increase biodiversity in public open spaces such as parks. Well, you won't be surprised if I say we own the public space known as the golf club, a great park if ever there was one. So how does concreting over large parts of this and felling thousands of trees reduce environmental impact? Your document claims that BNG improves natural habitats, but we're fragmenting environments and habitats by these developments. And what about the animals? There have been reports of
That's
dead
1 minute
badgers.
remaining.
There have been reports of dead badgers around Harvest Hill. And what about the deer and the bluebells and everything else that in their amazing habitat? The Guardian yesterday reported a Woodland Trust report that says only 7% of Britain's woodlands are in good condition, and the number of birds fell by 15% over the last 5 years. So every bit of space matters. We are outraged if South Americans destroy the Amazon rainforest, but in what precise way are we acting any differently than them if we place the economic value of our land above the environmental value? The Maidenhead Great Park is our Amazon if we genuinely mean there is a climate emergency, and we were trusted by wiser generations before us to protect it for our grandchildren. So if we're serious about climate change, then wouldn't protecting the golf club space do more good than all these admittedly fine words in this document? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And so that's the end of our public speakers. And what I think is, should we go to, I think, maybe go to the panel next, and then we can then, so are there any panel members that would like to speak on this before we go back to the officers? Councillor Majid, over to you.
A few questions. Thank you very much for that presentation, James. It was very helpful. You mentioned the emissions were reduced by 18.6% up to 2022. What's happened since, and what are your projected figures for after? Because obviously we are having a lot of development, and one of the public speakers mentioned about concreting a lot of the green area as well. So where are we now, and where are we going to be in a few years' time? You mentioned 750 EV charge points over 10 years. Where are they all going? And why 10 years? Can we not do them any quicker? Needs be. On the community partners, you mentioned key partners. I did see some stuff on there regarding churches, but can we also involve the synagogue, the mosque, and the Gurdwara House and the Hindu temple as well? So they'll be quite keen. And finally, I was actually reading yesterday an article about Swift bricks. So you're on about sustainability and the natural environment. Even though planning policy does ask for people to put Swift bricks in. So these are bricks which have got holes in, and they're used for nesting for swifts. However, we don't actually enforce that with people. So that's something that would be a quick turnaround. for us, for the natural environment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Majid. There was one point about the EV chargers and the location of that. So I wanted to recall that we actually covered that as a full item on one of our previous ONS. We had a full presentation on their locations and the rollout of that scheme. So we can refer you back to that as well if you want to have a look at that. It has a whole list of where they're targeting the maps, and it was very thorough presentation. We do have available to us Doug as well from our transport manager. So potentially he could answer that, James, rather than yourself if you prefer. So we could, if you want an answer to that now over and above that, then we can also go to him.
Or speed, so it's just a quick slide.
Okay, we'll cover that briefly because obviously we did cover it in full on the previous one. But yeah, happy to get a brief summary for you on that as well, because I know it was a lot of location outside of city centres as well. So it was covering rural areas, which we noted was particularly good approach. So I think, James, if we can go to you, we have a couple of things from the public speakers and then also Councillor Majid's points as well, please.
The borough-wide emissions, we're due to get the 2023 emissions over the next month, and that will inform that decision or that point. In terms of predictions, that seems a little foolhardy, but we have seen consistent reductions. Obviously, over the time period of the strategy, we have had the pandemic, which did impact our emissions, but we do expect them to continue to decrease. I can't quite remember whether that goes in the quarterly assurance report, but we can provide an update either to the panel or to yourself directly once those are published. In terms of EV charging, I will leave that to Doug to cover off, but in terms of your point around multi-faith, we would absolutely welcome the opportunity to engage with a wider range of faiths, and maybe we can have a conversation after this panel or I'll be in contact after this panel to see whether we can achieve that. But I'll hand over to Doug, who I think has joined us online to maybe just give you that summary on EV charging.
Thank you very much, James. Good evening, everybody. My name is Doug Tremellon. I'm the Transport Policy Manager for the Borough. In answer to the question about EV charging rollout, where are the charge points going and should they be happening faster? These charge points that we refer to will be going on street in locations near to, particularly targeting locations near residential properties which don't have access to their own driveways, which is where a lot of people will want to charge their own EVs, where people don't have access to driveways. So for instance, terraced housing in Windsor, they will need on-street charging. So a lot of the charge points would go in those locations. We would also make sure we spread them around the borough as well, for instance, to our rural villages, as was mentioned, so nobody's too far from any charge point. In relation to the speed of that rollout, we've targeted the speed of the rollout based on the Oxford University's study of how fast uptake and changeover to EVs is likely to be. So we will be staying ahead of the demand curve, so that people will be encouraged to take up EV because there will be good provision for their needs, but not rolling it out any faster than that. And the reason for that is that although £900,000 sounds like a lot of money, and it is, that won't cover nearly the full cost of that rollout. We'll need a lot of private money to come in alongside that as well. So that means that we need the market to grow in order to bring in that extra private investment alongside the money that the government has pledged. That's a very, very brief summary. There is an EV charge point implementation plan, which is published on the council's website, and which, as Councillor Rees mentioned, we discussed at a previous ONS meeting, which goes into a lot more detail. I'm also happy offline to answer any further questions.
So just to pick up some of the points made earlier, in terms of reducing energy consumption across all buildings, that is something, as we detail in the impact report, we have been doing through the government's fuel poverty schemes. So that's using money such as Eco4, sustainable warmth. There are lots of different schemes available. We have them all detailed on our website. They are naturally targeted at fuel poor properties. Fuel poverty is a relatively small issue in the borough compared to other boroughs and other county areas. We are an area with one of the lowest fuel poverty rating numbers in the country, but we still do have pockets, and there are schemes available to support residents who are suffering from fuel poverty. We also do have things like the collective solar purchasing to enable, and we've had well over 100 installations of solar happen through that scheme. In terms of education, communication, marketing, I agree. It's certainly something that we as an authority recognise. Again, we can't do all the work ourselves. We need to engage and enthuse people to take action. I hope that some of the stuff you've seen earlier gives you a sense of that work we're doing to educate young people and adults on the issues. But I also know colleagues in environmental services are currently recruiting for 2 environmental services behavioural change officers to support that work to, as you quite rightly say, reduce consumption and increase recycling rates. So I believe those 2, well, I can see in front of me, those 2 jobs are open for applicants at the moment. In terms of the in-store recycling map, take the point, and we'll make sure to get that updated over the next few days. In terms of some of the points that I won't comment too much, I think it's probably more appropriate for colleagues in planning, development management and planning policy to comment on some of the points. But I do understand the fragmentation of habitats, and that's something through our tree planting at Ockwells. We've looked to, if you have a look at where we've tree planted, it is about joining existing woodlands up to create better, larger habitats for nature. So that is something that we are aware of. And of course, biodiversity net gain is law. The golf course development will need to deliver a 10% biodiversity net gain. From that is measurable using the metric, the statutory metric that DEFRA have provided, and therefore we do expect to see a net gain of biodiversity from that development.
Thank you. If I may, I would like, before I've seen a flood of panel members come up, I just wanted to pick up on one thing, if I may, particularly close to my heart. Is obviously you talked about the habitat and about Ockwells being obviously a council for Cox Green ward. I know it very well, and I've seen obviously that being implemented where we're actually joining up to ancient woodlands and broadening the corridor. They're very young trees and will take a number of years to obviously grow to the full potential and fill out the space. My concern is more around, it's great to give these habitats and to increase them for wildlife, but as Andrew Hill pointed out, and I have seen this as well, we are already seeing badgers killed on the 404, and also recently report of a deer also being killed on Schopenhangers Road. Now, these are obviously being displaced now. The building work is happening now on Spring Hill and around Kimbers Lane, and I'm just concerned that there's no active movement to in some way guide them. They can't cross the 404. Okay, they won't use the bridge, the pedestrian bridge at Kimbers Lane, to get across and rehouse themselves there. What I don't see, and I'd like to hear more about, is what is the positive action in trying to make sure that we're getting these creatures rehomed in these amazing new habitats that we've got. It's all well and good saying, okay, we're going to have biodiversity net gain on the golf course of 10%. That's great, but where's it going to be located, and how are we going to get them to to habit that area? that's my major concern, and I'd like to hear more about how we're looking at that from a sustainability perspective, because in my notes, Andrew actually specifically read exactly what I had made in notes around the weight of SPDs. And I think that's something that we need to take away. And I know, James, I take your point, you can't answer that, but you have 2 full-time ecologists working alongside planning. And I think it's something we need to actually talk about seriously, because the weight of these SPDs is not given the way. I've been on the planning panel for a couple of years, and I've heard the exact same explanation about where we have a tilted balance and it has to be demonstrable and significant, and they just don't give significance to that. And what we need is internal pressure as well, and weight given to that. So it's openly expressed that that weight should be given and what that should represent, because it doesn't help panel members in planning to be able to actually counter that argument of the tilted balance, because we're just being told build, 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 wherever you can build by central government. So the 2 things is the habitat is the most important thing. Is yes, we have this biodiversity net gain and new habitats, but how do we get the creatures to go there? And I don't think I've ever heard an answer to that.
Expensive answer, but I can give you an example of something that we do. Something like slow worms, for example. On a site, you would look at capturing them, and there are ways of doing that, and I will defer to my ecology colleagues on how to do that, and they will be moved to a receptor site, so you do start moving certain species like that. In terms of your mammals, your larger species, there will be an element of they will naturally move through space, but in terms of capturing them and moving them, that would probably be quite a very difficult exercise. But we could have a look at what we require of developers to see if there is something that can be done to support that.
Okay, yeah, I think we need to hear more, and we need to get more input from the ecology department, or the people involved in that, the experts, to actually give us more feedback on that. And I'd like to really challenge them to also reach out to panel members and to train panel members, or to have some meeting with them to be able to give them insight in how they can actually give weight or understand the weight that can be given to natural habitats and to the rehoming of them. Because as I say, as I repeat, they won't use the pedestrian bridge to get over the 404. And I've driven past a number of dead badgers on nearby roads. And as I said, there was a dead deer as well, and they're being hemmed in by those developments. So we need to really look at how we can more actively resolve this. Okay, sorry, that's my point I wanted to make, because it flowed in from what was being discussed. Okay, if I can go on, next on the list is Councillor Singh, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you for that presentation, James. There's lots of good stuff in there. I do like this impact report. What was I going to talk about? Yeah, the Guildhall, the 20 tonne of carbon which has been saved, £3 million which has been secured, decarbonisation for schools, and top 10% of council's carbon reduction. Yeah, I mean, there's loads of good stuff in there. So I like that, and the report's about the right size. 26 pages is good. It's quite easy to understand and digest. The only criticism I've got is about this 30,000 trees that have been planted in Knockwells and Thriftwood. I've looked at that, and I know that was done before the last election. I think that figure's a bit disingenuous on that statement. You know, the definition of tree there, because there's different definitions. I mean, we've had you know, we've had reports from you know, the tree officers and planning, and they've given us a report for 10 or 15 trees on the site, where there could be potentially, I mean, if you're counting all the little whips and acorns and everything, it could be loads. So I just question that figure, and whether that can be changed in the phrasing. There were trees. I mean, the only evidence I could see was part of the Queen's Canopy celebration. There was 8,000 trees apparently planted in 21-22, and then 3,980 saplings, which I see some evidence of those been planted by volunteers. But I just think we've got to be very careful because the rest of the report is very honest, and there's tangible figures in there. But that is just something that I would question. The other stuff that I just wanted to, the EV charging points, the 750 points, 10 years, I think that's a bit too long. I know comments have already been made. If you can compress that, we are, as a borough, we're one of the highest owning EV vehicles per resident in the country, so we're well ahead of that curve. But yeah, if we can get more EV charging points, that would be really good. The other thing is, I did want to say, if we can look at, in terms of the transport, look at the net zero in terms of the bus and taxis, because these are big pollutants, and whether we can incorporate that into the strategy, and at some point, get that down to zero emission. Other than that, we touched on the planning area. Planning is important for climate. If we can get ahead of the curve and engage it early with applicants, I think we can get better results. My criticism of the team is we engage very, very late with applicants, and sometimes it's left to the planning committee to put additional conditions on. We had an applicant recently where we put it was an area of poor air quality, and we managed to add a condition on for internal air quality monitoring plan on the site. We also requested that a cost was levied to the developer in terms of the damage to the air quality. There's a prescribed guideline and a methodology which DEFRA provide, and something like that. If we can top load that into these applicants, I think it'd be better for the development and better for the residents. And just lastly, whether there's anything that we can do in terms of commercial developments that are happening in our area. I know we've got some really good BREEAM outstanding office developments which are in planning, or just one has just been approved. But if there's something that we can do to sort of push applicants more, because what we're seeing around the town, and I'm hearing from business owners and companies, is they want really high quality, highly sustainable, grade A, BREEAM outstanding office developments to move into. And if we're looking at sort of, longevity, that's what we should be sort of supporting. So that was just my comments. But other than that, the rest of the work you're doing is really good. Thank you. Just.
If I could just come on one thing to say, with the you mentioned about the air quality around planning and the quality issue. If we can actually say that, because our next item is actually the air quality management strategy. So I'd like to park that, please, rather than James. Can we leave that so you don't need to come back about that part? We'll actually bring that back up around the AQMS agenda item. Is that okay, Councillor Singh? We're going to park that and bring it back because we're actually covering that in the next item about air quality.
Yeah. Look, I'm happy to, but I mean, I was just thinking that you could incorporate that into the climate strategy as well as the monitoring, because the monitoring is slightly different. But although I will come into the monitoring, because I did have a pop at the applicants about the monitoring. So they were pulling data from Frascati Way rather than the actual site.
This is the next item is going to be about a whole strategy around air quality.
Okay.
So we'll save it for that.
Yeah, I can do that.
And then rather than for this, because this is talking about obviously other elements of the climate
Okay, fair enough.
strategy. Is that okay?
Thank you.
And this is an existing one. The new climate strategy is going to be happening over the next year. They're going to be pulling that together. So obviously points will be made, which will be great to carry over. I don't want to dismiss it. I just want to put it in the next one, and we'll bring it back up. We'll bring it back up then. Okay. But if you want to talk to the other things such as the trees and the other questions about.
Yeah, I think in terms of, I'll come to the trees, but in terms of, I think most of the other points, I think they were suggestions for the new strategy. We'll take those away and we'll make sure they're fed into the process. And of course, we'll bring this new strategy back to this panel later in the year. In terms of the tree planting, I wasn't quite sure in terms of the numbers. As far as I'm aware, that is since around 2019, 2020. I do take your point around how you would define a tree. Most people, when you say a tree, think of something, very large. But what I would also say at Ockwells, there was tree planting, I think 8 or 9 years ago. I can't remember the name of the woodland there, and it is now an established woodland and really good for nature. What I would also say is that we don't just plant little whips and leave them to fend for themselves. As I mentioned earlier, we've had Centrica out in the last week doing tree care. So we will go in, we will take away supports, we will make sure that the trees are surviving and thriving. So we have a pretty high rate of success in that tree planting element. So I do take your point. Sometimes when you talk about a tree, people will imagine an established tree, but the vast majority, if not all of that 30,000, I think over the last year we've planted the last sort of plant trees over the winter period, and I think it was around 4,000. But I can get the exact numbers. Literally year by year, we keep a tally of how many trees, so I can provide that to you just for note. But yes, of course, they are small, but they will establish, and in a few years' time, we do hope that it will look like one established woodland across the board.
Question, sorry.
Okay, if you want to follow on a point.
Thank you. Yeah, just on the tree. Because what I thought, my understanding was, I thought that it was like 12,000 in Ockwells, because in the report you haven't mentioned any other tree planting anywhere else in the borough, and I thought it was probably like another 15,000 in the rest of the borough.
The vast majority of our tree Ockwells to link those two woodlands, as Chair said earlier. There have been other schemes like the orchard planting scheme that has been wider. Obviously, we can generally only plant on land that we own, but we have also started working. Some of the team we offer any large landowners an office a visit to provide advice on habitat creation or what they can do with their land. I think it's anything over a hectare. So we have been working with some private landowners to provide advice as well. But in terms of the tree planting, we've done the vast majority. It has been at Ockwells.
Okay, thank you. And also, do you have any figures, or can you include any, like, for example, like development, like for example, Kimbers Lane was mentioned. For example, there's like phase 1 and phase 2. There's like over 300 trees being planted across the phase. Do you include any of those figures in your tally assessment or not? Is that excluded? Okay. We plant as a borough. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If I can go to Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you, Chair. So I want to start by acknowledging the hard work of the officers and the community partners who have supported many of the initiatives reported. However, as we approach the final year of the current strategy, it's our responsibility to look critically at whether the actions taken so far are truly sufficient and whether they position us to meet the scale and urgency of the climate crisis. Saying that we're in the top 10% of local authorities is probably not helpful and might result in a sense of complacency, for example. I've got a few questions. So the first one is to do with the borough's emissions you say that they've fallen by 18.6% since 2018, but the I believe it was the Tyndall curve that we adopted suggests that we should already be approaching a 43% cut by now. So can you tell us what actions are being taken to catch up? And do these figures include the COVID years as well? Because if so, they could be inaccurate, as obviously we've got more car travel now, and in that year, it didn't really reflect a typical year. Are we measuring impact or just activity? Many of the actions on the report are marked complete, but we don't always see evidence of their actual impact in terms of CO2 saved or biodiversity increased. So in the future, can we ensure that we're measuring and reporting the outcomes, not just the outputs? I think that would be useful. Transport is one of our largest sources of emissions, yet the local transport plan remains in development 5 years into this strategy. So we want to find out what interim measures are being prioritised now to cut emissions from travel and improve air quality. And I know we're talking about air quality in the next topic. I know your document refers to the bike store near Windsor Leisure Centre, and it says, oh, we've made a big new, route in from Clewer to Windsor. There's never any bikes in there. It's in completely the wrong place. So, things like that don't really help. I don't really see that that's increased anything in terms of transport or preventing cars going into Windsor. There's one bike that I've seen in there so far, and that made headline news on social media. So, I just think it's in completely the wrong place. It's not in a good place for Windsor. We've made good progress reducing emissions from our own estate, obviously in terms of RBWM. 0.5% of the borough's total footprint. That's fantastic. But I wonder what more is being done to influence other sectors. So housing associations, schools, local businesses, also any events that take place in the borough. What are we doing to talk to them about how they could run the event more sustainably? I know I saw up there something about Windsor and Eton Pride. We're paying for disposable cups. I mean, that's great. But what about other events? They generate lots of rubbish and lots of noise and that sort of thing. So what are we doing to encourage all these other partner sort of organisations and events? And sort of final question, I've got a couple more points, but my final question is about how the next strategy addresses the climate adaptation, including the flood mitigation, biodiversity resilience and infrastructure protection. Because we're obviously already seeing flooding and extreme weather locally over the last 5 years since the report came into play. Just wanted to make a couple more comments. Wanted to make sure climate governance for RBWM must be cross-party and accountable. So we want to make sure that the Cabinet commit to a genuinely inclusive process. For example, we've got Councillor Da Costa, who's working with the LGA on a statutory climate duty for councils. So, that's a good opportunity there to, ensure that we're using all of our resources, not just people in the Cabinet, because we do have a lot of expertise in these areas. So that's all I wanted to say, apart from, obviously, this is written in response to a climate emergency. So we've just got to be judged against that standard, really. I mean, it's not going to go away. So, that concludes my questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Carpenter. Well thought out questions, and if we can go through them, James, I assume you've written them down. So if we go through them and also deal with the comments, that would be great.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Chair. So in terms of your comment around the Tyndall Centre curve, yes, we are behind. I suppose we understand the climate, the crisis does need urgent action. We recognise this early, and that's why we set up the climate partnership, recognising the scale of the challenges beyond what we as a local authority can influence, as you quite rightly say. Our emissions as a council, as an organisation, are a tiny fraction, and that's why we set up the climate partnership, to bring in that business, to bring in the residents, the community groups, to give them a say in influencing the action that we take. But you're quite right in saying that we would want to be, if we were following the Tyndall Centre curve, much further along. In terms of impact or activity, my feeling is that across the board we do have the information. Maybe it doesn't come out in this report, and that's something we can look at going forward. Obviously, naturally, the activity of tree planting creates new habitat, and we could measure the number of new habitat. The impact of or the activity of installing solar panels has a very big impact on our carbon emissions. So there are, I take your point, and if we need to change the way we communicate it, we can look at that, absolutely. In terms of encouraging others, just to correct, we've paid for reusable cups for Windsor Pride, not disposable. But you're but you're quite right. We do want to be influencing those events, and we have published the sustainable events checklist. So there is a checklist now that is available on the RBWM Together website that provides guidance and the sorts of things that we would expect to see as part of a sustainable event. The climate partnership, again, is all about influencing others. When I demonstrate or showed the table up earlier, it's about small sums of money that can create. But what I would also say is working with people like Dave and the Eco Action Hub, they can have that impact as well. And we need to work with more of those sorts of organisations and can continue the work we do with the Wilds, for example, to get them to encourage people, so that people are talking to their neighbours, to their friends, and that's how we will see the scale of change we need. In terms of your point around the next strategy, I won't go in any detail because we will obviously pick that up later in the year. But in terms of your point on climate resilience, absolutely, and I hope you can see by the structure of the team, it is something we also recognise. Flood risk sits within sustainability, as does infrastructure planning, and I think that's something that we can absolutely look at, including in the next strategy. I think there were two transport-related issues, and again, I'll defer to Doug if that's all right, just to pick up on those ones.
Thank you very much, James. I got the first question here was about the development of the local transport plan. You may be aware that the Department of Transport has for some time been promising new guidance on how local transport plans should be written, in particular in relation to how local transport plans calculate the carbon impact of interventions that are proposed, but be they both positive and negative. We've been waiting on that for a few years now, and I dare say it's not going to materialise before the end of this year. That's important because the council plan has committed the council to producing a local transport plan this year. So we are now working on it, and it will appear by the end of the year, with or without the Department for Transport guidance in relation to calculating carbon impact. We'll do our best if we don't get that guidance to come up with our own methodology. But what we have done in the interim is produce the three really important, I'd suggest, daughter documents to the local transport plan in advance of the overarching umbrella plan coming forward. So those are our local cycling and walking infrastructure plan, our bus service improvement plan, and our EV charge point implementation plan. And I say in a way that they're kind of more important because those are almost the action plans. The strategy, the local transport plan is the overarching strategy, but we've brought forward in those daughter documents real tangible things that we want to take forward now. Local cycling and walking infrastructure plan has driven our investment in cycling and walking facilities around the borough over the last 2 years. The bus service improvement plan has directed the recent bus service retendering, which has resulted in a number of targeted improvements, which we hope will open up bus services to a lot more people. And the EV charge point implementation plan has guided the tendering exercise for identifying a partner or partners for on-street charging around the borough. In relation to the cycle store and investment in walking and cycling more generally, I think many people know that the cycle store opened last July. but due to a construction error that the manufacturer has accepted responsibility for and paid for, it didn't. It almost immediately closed and reopened again in January this year. January and February are not traditionally high cycling months. But what we do have is we've started to see people using that. So the month that I have data for at the moment is only 1 month, but that's April. We've got 12 regular users and 50 sessions in April. That's a slow start, but it is a good start, and it is starting to show people are picking up and using it, and really encourage people to use it. In terms of the location, yes, a storage site in Windsor Town Centre, or indeed Maidenhead Town Centre, would be really great as well. But we had the site available and the funding to put one in there, and residents have been asking for a long time for secure cycle parking at the leisure centre. So we believe that was a good site, even if there are other sites as well. And alongside that, we've been Councillor Carpenter, you mentioned the corridor into Windsor. So that was improved around about the same time. We've seen since we've introduced that, we believe a 44% increase in walking and cycling journeys along that corridor in the first year, and tentative signs are from this year that that we're 10 to 20% up on last year again this year. So that is growing really encouragingly. Last year we were just short of 500,000 journeys walking and cycling into Windsor along that corridor, and it should be more this year. So I think these projects do make a difference, but what's important is that we keep going, we keep delivering on the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan. More of these projects will mean more people are able to walk and cycle more often. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've got Councillor Taylor next, but if I could just take 1 moment and then I'll come straight to you, if that's okay, Councillor Taylor. I just wanted to pick up because I know that Councillor Carpenter brought up about events and about that. And when I was reading in there, it talked about the Sustainable Event Award and that being given to events. And there's bronze, silver, gold. Now, I went on to that award and to check it. What I'd like to know is how many people have applied for it, how many people have even been given an award. And I know it's nice to put on their advertising, which is what it says there. You can put that. But do we feel that that's enough? And should there be more of an encouragement for those events to give them the kudos of what that actually means? For example, and it is just a suggestion to be taken away, and I'm not trying to, particularly because we have budgetary impacts, but, for example, a more favourable rate for the event, such as, if they're, for example, on council land, if they have a gold award, then that should give them some sort of benefit in some way, rather than them just being able to put it on all of their leaflets. So how many people have actually applied, and has it been awarded to any events yet since it's been started? So I'd like to know that, please.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, so I don't have that data in front of me. I'm certain, almost certain, I won't say certain, I'm almost certain it has been awarded, but I would have to check, but I can provide that after the meeting.
So maybe a suggestion is, if it is awarded to people, we can also put it on the actual website where the award is applied for, because I'm sure that those events would like to have that kind of additional promotion, and that would be something we can do for free by actually putting it on there and promoting that people have actually been awarded it. So I think we can do more with that award to actually make better use of it. Councillor Carpenter, did you want to follow on for something?
Yes, sorry, just quickly. Yeah, thank you for that. I've just had a look. I mean, I've organised quite a lot of events in the borough and I've never seen that and I've never heard of it. So it's really good. Thank you very much. We'll take a look.
Thank you. And I know that came up in the complete with reduced single-use plastic usage in our own estate. So, and then we talked about launching this Sustainable Events Award. So if that's a completed aim, I think maybe that's something that we should open up again and actually improve a little bit more around actually its delivery as well. I go to councillor Taylor next. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Just got a couple of queries, thoughts, and really, I was reading with interest the electric vehicle charge point implementation plan from page 20, where it talks about the rollout of green bays. And I just wanted to ask, how confident are we that we're going to be able to use our normal enforcement route, which is what's being suggested in the plan, to make sure that these bays are actually readily available for charging? I know when we had the street trial, there were issues with people parking in the electric bays, and it does say in the plan that, you know, you're kind of relying on drivers to give up the space and leave them free for chargers. But if on one part of the plan, you're saying, I think it's in 2035, 70% of households will be within a 5-minute walk of a charging point, it's not much good if they can't use the charging point. So that's one question I'd like to ask, is how confident are we and how are we going to do that to ensure that they are readily available to be used as they're intended? Another point I'd like to make is about similar to what Andrew Hill was saying about the biodiversity. We've had in planning where we've had biodiversity gains that are going into a different ward to where the planning application is. Now, we've had a lot of planning applications in Oldfield with some of those biodiversity gains going into Cox Green, which I understand why, but at what point does it get where all of the biodiversity gains are going into a different ward? You've got one ward that's really, really lacking. How confident are we that we're keeping a check on that and seeing if the balance is correct and that everything is running how it should be? Also, on that kind of same vein, I know I was speaking to Berkeley on their site. They give new home packs to residents that are moving in, and we had a conversation about including all the council numbers and councillor details, etc., etc. Are you working closely with them? Because I think it would be very good to have information about like the work that Dave does and the Eco Action Hub and other local amenities and places that they can go to for information also listed in those packs, so that when they're moving in, they've got all that information readily available for them. And the other thing I just wanted to mention is, or ask, how closely you are working with our social housing providers, because I have heard of several instances when residents, particularly in shared ownership, are going for heat pumps and also EV charging points, and there's issues with the land, whether it's RBWM land and housing solutions or ABRI land, and that there's a crossover point. And I think that kind of, that sticking point, there seems to be a bit of a communication issue in trying to get past that, which is preventing tenants and shared ownership people from actually implementing that sort of thing to their homes. So that might be worth looking at, just to see if any the communication channels can be improved and to try and you know, make it easier for people to actually get those EV charging points and that in. Thank you.
In terms of the again, the EV charging parking, I will defer to my colleague Doug, but I will cover off the other points. So in terms of biodiversity net gain, the law requires the biodiversity to be located anywhere in England. So the law isn't particularly strong on that. We are looking at how we can secure or provide opportunity to keep that biodiversity net gain within the borough. And that's something we're doing quite a lot of work on fairly urgently to enable that. In terms of ward by ward, there is obviously a challenge in terms of space and how you do that. And alluding to, I can't remember if it was Andrew's point earlier, just around habitat. Quite often you want to try and join up and get that scale of habitat. So sometimes there is merit in almost combining different areas to provide a bigger, larger, more sustainable habitat for nature. But in terms of your sort of final 2 points, we haven't done any work on including things into new home packs, I would welcome doing that. I think it's a very good idea, not something we've done. Even just providing advice on their local nature reserves, that, you know, as you quite rightly say, that the other sustainable elements, we could quite easily pull together a piece of work or a document in some form that, fact sheet that provides information on all things sustainability, if you like. If there is an openness from developers to do that, then we will do that. So maybe we can pick that up after. Sure. In terms of how we work with housing associations, we do work fairly closely, but possibly there's, you know, like all things, there is opportunity for improvement there. And if there is if we are finding blockers, please do raise those with me, and I can look to see what we can do as an authority to improve the situation there, so we can provide the opportunity of sustainability as I see it to all our residents. So if there's an opportunity there as well, maybe we'll have a chat outside of this meeting to cover those two things off.
Thank you.
And Doug, just before we come to you to answer the EV element, I just wanted to please pick up on the housing association, which I think is a really good point. It has been brought up, obviously. And when we looked at the report, there were two items that were planned, because obviously this is the delivery to 2025, okay? And I was concerned that we still have two that are in planned stage when we're within 2025, and we need to then be looking forward to the next climate strategy. The first one was fine. It looked like it was okay. You were going to get it done because it was an audit and that was being planned. But the second one is about engage housing associations around a program of retrofitting homes with low carbon heating and power solutions. And it said planned, but the explanation is regular meetings are underway with housing providers to discuss opportunities to support each other in energy efficiency works. I'm just questioning why it's planned. If you're already in regular meetings with them, why it's not on ongoing delivery, and what do you feel is the right projection or the risk of that not being delivered under 2025? So I just wanted to ask that because it links directly into what Councillor Taylor was asking about.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do meet them regularly and we do engage with them regularly. If you refer back to the original environment and climate strategy, the measure of success for that action is about a monitoring framework to be included in the council's annual monitoring report. We haven't produced that yet. We haven't got there. So we do engage with them. But by the measure of success in the environment and climate strategy, I didn't think we could say we had completed that fully. So we will do work to try and pull together some kind of framework that we can develop with them. But in the spirit of sort of transparency, by the measure of success in the environment and climate strategy, I didn't feel like we were quite there yet, and it's something we were still trying to do.
And I did ask what you thought about the potential for actually delivering it within this particular strategy, or is it going to have to go into the next one?
If you stick with the action purely, we have achieved it, as you say. But in terms of the measure of success, I don't. And I think we still have 6 months left of this year. And you know, in terms of our carbon emissions, we work on financial years. So yes, I fully expect that we can achieve that within this year.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Blundell, we'll go to you.
Yeah, so similar to most other councillors, really impressed by the report. But specifically, I was evaluating the recycling, and whilst it's great that it's gone up, I think it was from 46% up a bit more. I was taking a look at where all our recycling actually went to, all the different materials, and noticed that it was just cardboard that was exported abroad to be processed, with all other recyclable materials being held domestically. Just curious about basically what the council has assessed the carbon emissions associated with shipping it abroad. I think it was Southeast Asia. And how does that compare to processing it in the UK? And on another point, is it possible in the UK? It'd be great to find out. And also, whilst obviously going through that, I saw that some of our materials being sent to Doncaster, Warwickshire, Manchester, with plastic actually ended up in waste plants. I'm only asking because I'm curious what effect our waste has on neighbouring regions and the effect it has in those countries as well, and if that's at all been evaluated in the report.
Question, and a simple answer is I would need to refer to my colleague who manages our waste contract. In terms of the points you raise, no, we haven't included them. Simple answer on that. There's lots of different elements about how you can. There are the government do publish figures on the carbon associated with waste generation. So you could turn that into carbon. We don't include it within our baseline at the moment. It's certainly something that we could do and would be relatively easy to do in the new strategy. But in terms of the other impacts it would have on neighbouring regions, that might be a little harder. I suppose it's all slightly subjective. But in terms of the more detailed journey that our waste and recycling take, I'd probably have to refer to the relevant officer who manages that contract.
Maybe we can take that as an action. So if you can bring that back and report back to us on that, and get some information for that. Okay, I was conscious that I actually jumped very quickly to the list and to Councillor Brenda without actually getting Doug to answer Councillor Taylor's question around. So I apologise, we kind of leaped straight there. I was just conscious of time, so time was ticking in my head, so I kind of was leaping forward. If we can quickly go to you, Doug, and have an answer.
Yes, no problem. So when we installed the first round of on-street EV charging points in the borough, because relatively few households had EVs, the approach we decided, and there's a lot of, as everybody knows, there's a lot of locations which are really parking constrained. There's a lot of competition for, or need for that parking space on the street. The approach we took was that at each site we'd install 6 sockets, so that there were 6 locations where an EV could park up and be able to reach an EV charge point. And the idea being that the natural turnover of cars would likely mean that most of the time, if you wanted to turn up, at least one of those spaces would be free and you could plug in. Now, over time, I'm pleased to say that the EV uptake is growing. And so what the team I know are now looking at with our parking enforcement team is how at some sites we will pilot having specific restrictions at some of those bays for charging EVs only. That there's a sort of a legal process that needs to go in to mark those bays out in such a way, and once they are, then parking enforcement officers would be able to take action if a non-charging EV was occupying those bays. So we're trying to transition over from an arrangement of slightly over providing at locations so that there'd be the provision of somebody turned up to having allocated bays.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Doug. Appreciate that. Councillor Martin, I can come to you next.
Yeah, thank you, James, for the report. It was really, really inspiring, actually. I've just got a couple of points on it. One is, as councillors, how can we get involved, with the community partnerships, either as individuals, volunteers, or corporates? So that's my first question. The second one, I'm just a little concerned from Dave's point, the speaker earlier, about the map not functioning. I found that myself in certain browsers. So could we do an audit? Maybe that's an action. Do an audit of that map and how it's working and how up to date it is, because it's looking like it's about 3 years old from the most recent pinpoints on that. So is that something that could be looked at as well? So thank you.
So yeah, simple answer. We'll look at that map over the next couple of days and get that sorted. And I think your suggestion of the browser audit is probably a very good one as well. I know lots of different people use different browsers these days, and that can impact. In terms of how councillors can get involved in that that work, we do have, I think, in here a list of the different opportunities for volunteering. So there's that. But we can provide information on the different opportunities out there, the different activities we're running. And I think your point again around communication, possibly the members' newsletter that I think goes out every week, would probably be it would be a good opportunity to put more in there about what we're doing, so that councillors who wish to can be more involved.
Thank you very much. I do have a couple of questions, but I can see that we've got Councillor Werner on the list, who I assume you want to speak, and then I can then ask my questions afterwards, conscious of time, but I'll make them quick. Also, a couple of questions I'll be representing on behalf of the Youth Council. They spent a lot of time reviewing this report, and we really encourage more and more people to take part in scrutiny. It's wider than just the councillors on the panel. So there are some questions on there. There are quite a few questions. So just to note, I've spoken with Mark, and we will make sure that all of those questions are answered, not in the meeting, but subsequent to the meeting, and it will be published as part of the minutes, so that then also reported back to the Youth Council, so they get all their questions answered. There are one or two that have already been answered, but I may ask one or two. So, and then I have a couple of my own, and then I think we're probably going to get close to the end of time for the item. But Councillor Werner, if I can go over to you.
I mean, I'm obviously here from a policy point of view and thinking about the development of the next strategy. And I must admit, I've been really quite excited by many of the comments that have been made tonight. I think it shows that there's real passion for making sure this administration's first climate strategy, because of course it will be our first one, is the best it can be. And I really do welcome all councillors and indeed interested residents who want to get involved in the process. And that's real experts in local organisations. You mentioned the Wilds, the Eco Action Hub, Dave, and getting the youth councillor involved as well. I think it's fantastic. So thank you, and we really will take on board all your comments. But more, we want to work really closely with you as we develop the next climate strategy. It won't be perfect. It won't be everything we could want, because the limitations you talked about, government targets on development, will place limitations on what we can achieve. Our financial situation will put limitations on us. But I think if we all approach it in a really positive way, I think we can really achieve great things. And I'm really looking forward to a lot of the engagement that we're hoping to do between now and when the climate strategies goes to Cabinet. So thank you, everybody. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. You might have wanted to save that until after I ask questions. You want to rescind some of that. No, joking aside, really important, like a lot of people, and I really appreciate all the panel members have committed a lot of time, and also public speakers as well, to actually look at this and do the scrutiny. Picking up on the fact that we will have a new strategy going forward. We'll have to develop that for the 26-27 year. And the plan is definitely, it's going to be on the work programme, and we will be bringing it forward to this panel around, I think we talked about September time, or like in the autumn period. So we'll have another bite of the cherry to be able to actually look at what the forward plan should look like, and how aggressive, or how, what targets we want to set for that. So there's a couple of things that I wanted to ask, if that's okay. I picked up on, there's lots of successes, which is great. Under the circular economy success, one of the headlines is about the increased recycling rate. So in there it said it's 44.3% up to 47.1% over the past 4 years. Okay, which is great. But when I went to the recycling facilities map, there's a statement on there, and it's the second paragraph on there. It says, we've seen great improvements as a borough in our recycling rates over the past 2 years, which have increased from 45% in 2019-2020 to 55.7% in 2021-2022. With residents' help, we hope to further improve this recycling rate to 65% by 2035. So there's two things. One, why is there a complete difference between the actual achieved percentages on this and the report? Because it's greater. It's 55.7% on there, but in the report, it was commented as 47.1%. So that's one part of the question. The other part is, with the residents' help, we're going to achieve 65% by 2035. I think we need to do it quicker than that. So actually, when we think about our next strategy, maybe more ambitious around that, and an actual plan of how we actually achieve that. So that's one thing. If you can hopefully answer why there's a difference between one and the other. Then also we talked about the reduction in the council of the carbon, and we were the borough that had the largest decrease in the carbon tons. I mean, that's great to say, but we had a very high starting point compared to some of the others. We started at 705 and we got it down to 574. But then I looked at some of the others that had a lower percentage reduction. Bracknell, their actual achievement is 386 tonnes, 386.1, and Reading is 466.1, still way lower than us. Okay, although they had a much lower percentage reduction. So my challenge is, are we speaking to Bracknell and Reading, and what are they doing well? Because they are huge metro, particularly Reading, it's a city. What are they doing right? They obviously are achieving a huge, lower carbon tons in their borough than we are, and Bracknell even lower. So I think we should be actually challenging ourselves further rather than just saying, yes, it's great. It definitely is great that we managed to achieve that reduction. But if we look actually at other boroughs like Bracknell and Reading, they're even lower than us as well. The sustainability SPD, what we've come across is that actually it's great to have the requirement for solar panels on new builds and to actually push for developers to deliver that. I think that's a great thing. But what's lacking is the battery storage, because you could actually generate it during the day, but then actually what's going to reduce it even further is to be able to store that energy, and then for the residents to be able to use it when obviously there's a much lower UV rate. So how are we looking at that and dealing with that? And then also from the Youth Council, they talked about the increase in recycling and also the single-use plastic. But what they wanted to ask is how much single-use plastic was actually being regularly used in-house, and so how much has this actually changed following the strategy? Because they didn't pick up on that and they didn't see what is the reduction. So we said it was complete about the in-house single-use plastic. And I noticed that you're doing it as a procurement checklist, and that all future procurement will be actually requiring that to be considered. But that was a question from them. Allotments could be better advertised to residents, particularly those without private gardens as well. I do know that that's parish councils that look after allotments, and I'm not sure how many allotments that RBWM have, because there'll be unparished areas potentially. So if we can look at that, they wanted to know if the book swaps will be yearly events. So will it be continued because they were a success? And could it also be potentially a travelling event? So, go to more locations as well. And we talked about, you mentioned the two ecologists that we've got, which I think is great. They're handling 80 per month. And their question was, how does the number of two compare to other local authorities? I think we probably need to know that at a similar size, because obviously the size will make a difference as to that and how that compares. But I think, the final thing is the first school street. I think it's great to acknowledge that, because in Cox Green, obviously it's in Cox Green, but in Wessex, it was a great success. And the residents, the feedback from them was amazing. We've seen a lot more people walk, and not everybody. Some people park further away and then walk the last distance, but they're still walking at least. And what I'd like to know is, now that's been a success, what does the program look like? Are they already looking at future schools as well? And what sort of time period? And that will be it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, there's quite a few there, so excuse me if I have missed any, but I've got a decent list here. So in terms of carbon emissions, you mentioned Bracknell, Forest and Reading are lower, and obviously started lower. Of course, they may well have less homes, they may well have less businesses, and they may well have less of lots of different things. So, you know, it would be difficult to say they are achieving because of the size differences there. And I think that's why the percentage reduction shows that journey that we've been on. Again, Reading as a very urban environment has a very different population, a very big university, for example, you know, very good bus network because it works in that sort of environment. So I think it's probably worth saying that they are different and each area will have different challenges. You know, we are predominantly very rural, and that therefore requires us to have, you know, invariably more cars. Whereas if you live in Reading, it's a much more urban environment. So in terms of that I think is why I think it would be difficult to just take that headline number and compare and suggest they're doing much better because their emissions are lower. You could look at a per capita, for example, and that information is available. And you can also look at per kilometre squared as well, and that element. And again, that is all available, and we can provide those sorts of comparators. In terms of battery storage, yes, I take your point. Obviously, we do want to include battery storage as part of the Solar Together collective solar purchasing. We do offer a battery add-on, if you like, as part of that. And I don't have the figures with me, but from memory, I seem to remember that more than 50% of the people installing panels were also installing batteries as part of that. I believe there is also an element in the SPD around encouraging people or developers to include batteries, but I don't know the relevant part and what that looks like. In terms of, I think these move on to the Youth Council questions. The council does operate a network of allotments. They are heavily oversubscribed. There is a waiting list associated with that. Work has gone on to start splitting plots to open up more opportunities for people to use those. But I again take the point that if we think we need to do more communications on that, then we can absolutely do that. And we have installed a small allotment area, sort of garden area at the Browick Nature Centre with some raised beds to try and teach people how to manage allotments and grow their own food. In terms of the costume swaps, so we will continue to work with Maidenhead Library and others to run those. We were really pleased with the reaction we got there. Not only is it good for sustainability that we are reusing costumes, it's also great that parents don't have to go out and spend 10, 15, 20 pounds constantly for the latest outfit. So yes, we will continue those, and I think the suggestion of moving that around is a very good one. So we'll look at the feasibility of doing that. In terms of the ecologists, I am aware of how many ecologists are in every Berkshire authority. 2 is the highest number. Others do have 2. Some do not have any and have to outsource any of that. But again, as a rural borough, we do often need to have more ecology advice. If you compare that to an urban environment, there is a different demand for it, but no other Berkshire authority, as far as I'm aware, has more than 2 ecologists. And maybe I'll just refer to Doug. If there is any I've missed, I can always obviously committed to writing to the Youth Council with full answers on all of those. But I will just refer to Doug on the School Street issue, because whilst I would like to take credit for that, that is a Doug project, and I'll refer to him.
Thanks very much, James. Well, I mean, actually, if I can sort of build on that, I was going to start by saying it's not really a council project. It really was a community project. We had real support from both the residents in that area and the school community. to deliver that, and I think that needs absolutely recognising. But it has been an extraordinary success, and it's for example, 35% more children walking and cycling to school. And we know that we've got a long list of other schools who are asking for these to go in around the borough. And we're in early discussions with a couple of them about how that might happen. But I would say we're slightly constrained by officer time and also funding to roll out more. And we certainly don't have an exact list of what school is going to be next at the moment. So a really successful project. We absolutely want to be doing more, and schools are interested. So look, yeah, watch the space.
Okay, thank you very much. James, you didn't answer about why there's a difference in the figures on the recycling, but if you don't have an answer now, I'm conscious of time, you can report back to us on why there's a difference between the amount mentioned in your report and the amount mentioned on the RBWM recycling facilities map.
Yeah, so I don't have a full answer, but what I can say in the last quarterly assurance report, I think the number is 51.7%. So that is the latest information that I've seen in the quarterly assurance report, but I can go away and speak to my colleague.
Yeah, just important to be consistent because it builds trust in people believing the figures. So if we can please make sure that we actually get the figures correct on all the reports and that they align, that would be great. Thanks. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for all the effort. It's incredible that's gone into this. We are coming up to 9 o'clock. We have one more item to talk about, which is the item number 7, the air quality management strategy. Should we ask if? Okay. We started it. It's 10. Oh, is it 10? Okay. So I've been advised, Amanda, you're going to be leading us into this item.
Actually going to pass straight over to Rhiannon for me. She's going to do a short sort of summary presentation of where we are with the air quality management areas and the new strategy.
Just briefly, do we want a quick comfort break before we do that? I don't know if people need that 5 minutes or just keep going. Happy? Keep going? Okay.
I've got a very short presentation, but just before I go into the presentation, I just wanted to say we do have our air quality status report that's about to be published. So this is a document that we are required to publish every year to DEFRA, which gives a lot more detail on monitoring data and some of the actions that have happened over the last 12-month period. So there'll be a lot more information in there about the sort of scientific detail around the monitoring, etc. Oh, sorry.
A bit closer.
Okay, so yeah, if you could go to the first slide, please. So yeah, this slide just summarizes how we monitor air quality in RBWM. So we are required to monitor air quality under the Environment Act, and in RBWM we do it through the use of diffusion tubes, which are a sort of passive measure for measuring nitrogen dioxide, and continuous monitoring at 5 sites, which give us data on nitrogen dioxide as well as particulates PM 2.5 and PM 10. The air quality management areas, which have very recently been revoked, were declared in relation to nitrogen dioxide specifically. So the next slide, I'll talk about the objectives. And the sites that we monitor are determined DEFRA around the likely areas of high concentrations of specific pollutants. And it's primarily related to traffic congestion, but it also looks at the building infrastructure. So obviously, where you have high-sided buildings and such like, you're likely to have, it will have an impact on the exposure levels at ground level of certain pollutants. Let's go next slide, please. So this is just, this is basically the national air quality objectives, which are set down in regulations. And as I said, our air quality management areas were declared in relation to nitrogen dioxide specifically. The nitrogen dioxide and PM10 are local air quality objectives. The PM 2.5 is a national objective, but the government guidance and the legislation does stress that local authorities have a key role in meeting the national objectives. Okay, so the next few slides are basically showing the monitoring locations, which is where the air quality management areas, now revoked air quality management areas, are located. So there's not much to say about them really, other than they just show the locations of the monitoring, and there are 5 monitoring locations currently. So we have the first one here in Windsor. Thank you. And then the St Leonard's Road, Imperial Road Junction. Another here in Maidenhead. Bray, and in Raisbury. So in the air quality status report, it will give you the codes that you see there, the references. In the air quality status report, it gives you the data relating to those individual monitoring stations in quite a lot of detail. And then we have other monitoring sites, which are listed here, and there were prior to the current air quality status report, there were more sites that were being monitored, but the levels were so low that it was deemed that it was no longer necessary to monitor in them. So you'll see between the air quality status report for the previous air quality status report, which is the one that's currently on the website, and the one that we are about to publish, if you compare the data sets in those two, you'll clearly see where we've ceased monitoring because the levels were low. Okay, so this just shows the air quality trends for nitrogen dioxide, and basically this is the justification for the revocation of the removal of the air quality management areas, because there is a sustained downward trend in nitrogen dioxide concentrations in the borough. You can see there's a considerable dip in 2020, which we know is a result of COVID, but even taking that to one side, you can still see a downward trajectory, and it's clear that it's heading further down in that direction. So it met the legal justification for revoking the AQMAs. Okay, so this basically summarizes the position. So the AQMAs have been revoked because we've met the criteria for the last 7 years, and there's every it is predicted that it's going to continue in a downward trend, which is the criteria for the removal of the AQMAs. The legislation and the guidance requires that where local authorities remove their AQMAs, or where they don't have any, that they develop a strategy, which is a proactive strategy that is designed to ensure that the improvements that have been made through the air quality management areas is sustained, and actually that things continue to improve, but also to keep a waking watch to make sure that things don't deteriorate again. And these are the highlights of our air quality management strategy. And a lot of what's in here actually has already been discussed by James and Doug, because there is a clear link between attempts to reduce carbon emissions and to improve air quality. So as you can see, I won't kind of go through them again, but you've got the local transport plan, the electrical vehicle charging points, the infrastructure to improve rates of walking and cycling, both local and national planning policy. And at the cabinet meeting where the revocation was approved, there was also another item at that same meeting with a planning guidance assessment document, which is designed to give some flesh on the bones around the circumstances under which additional air quality information is to be provided with development plans, and the types of mitigation that might be required. One of the things we've committed to delivering directly in the Environmental Health Department is to look at the expansion of smoke control areas. So the evidence shows that domestic fuel burning is a key source of PM 2.5 pollution. And so we have committed to looking at the expansion of the current smoke control areas. We will have to be very careful that we don't create risks in trying to solve the issue, because there may be people who are using solid fuel to subsidise their energy consumption, and so we will have to be very careful about equalities assessments and such like. But it's certainly something that we can look at. But we want to look at the experience of our neighbouring boroughs as well, because Reading has, you're probably aware, introduced a borough-wide smoke control area. And then the final thing is that environmental permitting. So this is something that we do as a business as usual function. We are legally required to use environmental permits and to issue environmental permits to suit certain industrial processes. And to monitor compliance with those licenses. And that's a key tool in managing pollution, not just air pollution, but other sources of pollution. And that's joint. So there are local authority functions in relation to environmental permitting, but also environment agency functions as well. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we do have a few public speakers on this, and I've also been informed that so we do have a councillor. It was sort of late request. Normally, councillors, we would need 24 hours notice to speak, but I'm going to use my discretion, and we'll also have Councillor Da Costa is going to also be registered as one of the three public speakers as well. I understand that's correct. You wish to speak still? Okay.
I didn't get that, but I can check.
Okay, but either way, it's going to be fine. You know, we're adding it to this. Yeah, no, you're on. It will be you'll be one of the public speakers. Yeah, that's what I was confirming. So if we can start with Dave, if you. I think you know and understand 3 minutes. Okay.
Thanks very much. Yeah, Dave Scarborough again, representing Climate Emergency Coalition and Eco Action. So well done for reducing the emissions. It's good. However, I suggest that we shouldn't be complacent, though, as our pollution levels do still exceed the HOO, the WHO, as you actually say in the document. Yeah. 5 years or so ago, I found some stats that the government produced that said in our area, there were 69 excess deaths due to air pollution. Now, I haven't been able to find any updated stats since that 5 years ago, but it just shows the level, the importance of sorting out our air quality. And we know also that there's going to be a lot more building work, especially in Maidenhead and central Maidenhead. And I'm sure you're well aware that means that you're going to get much more air pollution as well. So we do need to keep a track on that. And also, if James were still here, to try to ensure that the building contractors, the developers, are using non-diesel vehicles and diggers and all this sort of stuff, but that might be hard. You mentioned that most particulate matter is caused by open fires. Can we not do something about that ourselves? The annual mean values that are used, they may be the standard reporting value, but that can hide monthly or even daily spikes, which are dangerous. So some years ago, a group of us used a handheld monitoring device, a proper professional one, that showed and then we measured the values outside schools.
That's 1 minute remaining.
During drop-off and collection, and they were very high. In March 5 years ago, I produced a vision for clean air and shared that with Chris Joyce. Unfortunately, to my knowledge, nothing was actually done with it. And I would like the opportunity, please, to work with you to see if we can reuse some of those ideas moving forwards. As with the climate strategy, the proposed measures to reduce emissions need much more education and marketing and communications to encourage active travel, dissuading using cars, stopping idling, etc., etc. And finally, I'd just like to say what we find as we walk around. So we often see mums with buggies behind cars whilst they're taking other children out, and the child is right at the level of the exhaust. You talk to them and they have no understanding whatsoever.
Sorry, Dave, it's over the 3 minutes.
Right, thank
Was that
you.
the final point?
It was my final point.
Okay, I think we heard obviously the point definitely there about having children at the back of cars. And maybe that's part of education and we can roll that in. Okay, all right, thank you very much. If we can go to our next speaker, Andrew, over to you, 3 minutes.
Thank you. I helped Tom Wigley and the Maidenhead Great Park Group write the air quality petition that led to the purchase of the new monitoring equipment. RBWM were right to buy them, but they are mobile monitoring devices, so why aren't we placing them around the borough at the sites of greatest planning risk, like Schopenhauer's Road, to monitor the impact of dangerous PM 2.5 microparticulates on residents who live near the proposed new developments? The officer's report at paragraph 8.1 states that there is no statutory duty to consult on the new air quality plan and AQMA revocation. With respect, I think this is wrong. The legal duty to consult appears to be set out in Schedule 11 to the Environment Act 1995. This states that a local authority that is carrying out any air quality review must consult 8 named groups, including neighbouring authorities. Regardless of this, DEFRA certainly recommend to all UK councils in their written guidance that consultation on the revocation of AQMA should, quote, normally include local residents and businesses. So why have officers ignored this? Secondly, at paragraph 2.4, officers claimed that Cabinet has a mandatory legal duty to revoke the AQMA, citing paragraph 3.57 of Technical Guidance 22. This I do not believe is correct. Cabinet, in fact, have a legal discretion to scrap AQMA, not a duty to do so. DEFRA guidance says this in plain English, quote, under the Environment Act 1995, local authorities have the discretion to revoke. Officers are ignoring paragraph 3.56 of Technical Guidance 22, which clearly states that local factors do provide a legal discretion to retain the AQMA, even where there are 7 years of apparent improvements. These local factors include imminent massive town centre building projects. DEFRA say, quote, a great deal of caution should be exercised before revoking an AQMA. Keeping the AQMA order in force will potentially offer a greater check on developments within the area, which could significantly degrade air quality, thereby triggering redeclaration, end quote. RBWM plan to build thousands of houses just behind residents in Rushington Avenue in the town centre. Labour have told you to double house building to 1,400 a year. So logically, it is too soon to think about removing the AQMA, and the Cabinet has the legal discretionary power to keep it. Councils are supposed to protect residents. It costs you literally nothing to keep the AQMA in place. All that does is force developers to consider human health more deeply and more seriously. Are you elected to protect residents or developers? Please, please use your discretionary legal powers, protect residents and keep the AQMA. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Councillor Da Costa. You have 3 minutes from when you begin speaking.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to bring to this panel's attention that last year the AQMAs were sent to people, as it was then called, because the effects of air quality has its greatest impact on people rather than place. So I would like to respectfully ask that this panel does the same again this year and sends this paper to the Adult, Children and Health panel for consideration.
I'm not going to repeat what some of the other speakers have said about the need to continue monitoring air quality, particularly with the amount of development we have going on. And evidence does show that the people that are most affected by air quality are young people and vulnerable people. And we have no monitoring going on in areas of deprivation. And we know that people who live in lower social economic areas are most deeply impacted and their lives are shortened by air quality being poorer. So I would request that you send this paper to the Adult, Children and Health because of the impact on health from our air quality. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the public speakers. And do we have any, we don't have any panel members at the moment. Oh, Councillor Taylor's jumped in there. What we'll do is we'll go to you and then if we can then come to you in regard to the questions that have been asked so far.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to echo Councillor Da Costa's request to send this to people. I was chair of people when this came last time, and I do believe that is the best place for it to be. Due to the impact on health and the larger impact on people rather than place. So I would just like to support that, if I may. Thank you.
Okay. What we'll do is I'm just going to defer to Mark quickly, who wants to add something, some points to make for clarity, and then we can then discuss about that point.
Yeah, just on the point made by Councillor Da Costa about it going to people last year, absolutely it did. And that was when we had the remits with environmental health and air pollution falling under the people panel. We had a change, I think it was in April this year, in the Constitution between the remits of the three panels. So environmental health and air pollution came back under place ONS as a panel, so it wouldn't fall under the Adult, Children and Health panel now with the new remits, which is why it's changed across between the two panels. And we're sort of quite keen, and it's quite clear in the Constitution as well, that we shouldn't have sort of duplication of work happening across panels, that we kind of want to keep it to one single panel, which is where we're keeping air pollution in the place panel. So we wouldn't be then bringing that across to the Adult, Children and Health panel as well. It would just be debated in the place ONS panel because it falls under the place remit.
Okay, thank you. If you want to cover the other questions and then we can come back about the point around the suggestion about it not being, being pushed over into the Adults and Children and Health panel.
Thank you. I thought I'd just come in on a couple of things which have been raised in the questions, and some of the more technical aspects I will have to pass to Rian, and I appreciate some of the queries. We might just want to take that away so that we can do a full response. In terms of health, I think it's a really, really valid point that this is around people, it's around our communities, and that is who we are trying to protect through the air quality. One of the things I just wanted to mention, which you may or may not be aware of, under the Health and Wellbeing Board, there is a review and we are looking at a new 10-year health and wellbeing strategy, which has a number of aspects to it. Place is one of those, and that is a key area that we'll be working on with regard to our place colleagues. It's quite early on in that inception, this new strategy. So you will hear more about it. It's being led by Public Health. I'm involved with that, as is James, Rian, a lot of the people we've mentioned today, Chris Joyce as well, is involved in that. So we will be developing the place part of that Health and Wellbeing Board strategy. And air quality is one of those which has been raised in there that we will be looking closer at in terms of what that strategy will be and how it fits in with all these other strategies. So that, I'm pretty sure, will go to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee for people, but I would have to sort of perhaps refer back to Mark. But when that comes, so you will see that going to place, that going to that panel as part of that health and wellbeing strategy. One of the things in that health and wellbeing strategy, which has to be done as well, and I appreciate this is sort of outside of my day-to-day remit, is we will be doing joint strategic needs assessment, and this will completely focus on health and those wider determinants of health and what that looks like in RBWM. We will then have the opportunity to do a bit more of a deep dive into that data to tell us what it means. So certainly what you've been saying about areas of deprivation, what does it look like in those areas? How does that link in? How does it link into the deaths that you mentioned as well? We don't have that data at the moment. I don't believe we have it in that detail, but this new health and wellbeing strategy will enable us to do that deep dive. Obviously, it's a 10-year strategy. We've got to spend an amount of time actually putting that together and understanding the difference we're going to make. But I think it's really relevant to bring that in, because I think in the current strategy, because this is so new, when the strategy was being written with the air quality, it doesn't yet make reference to it. But we will have to put that reference into our air quality strategy with regard to the Health and Wellbeing Board and what they are trying to achieve. So I thought that was a really useful thing just to highlight of some other work which is going on elsewhere. I might pass over to Rhiannon with a few other points, but I'm going to come in if...
In terms of the data, I think the gentleman mentioned that the means might mask peak concentrations, for example. The air quality status report provides a lot more detail. My understanding, and I hasten to add that the author of the report, I am not the author of the report, that unfortunately couldn't be here tonight, but that there is live air quality data that is available on UKA websites. And in the air quality status report, there is a lot more detailed data, which might give answers to some of the points that you've made. However, if there is specific bits of information you want to discuss, I'm more than happy to talk about that and to speak to the author of the report on the sort of technical scientific detail. In terms of the point that the revocation of the AQMAs undermines the protection, I would respectfully disagree with that point, in that we are not compromising our monitoring. The monitoring remains, and I'll come to the point about the locations in a second. So the whole point of continuing with the monitoring is that we're able to identify if the trend, the downward trend changes. And as we are required to do by the legislation, we'll monitor and look ahead at things that may potentially increase the concentrations of the pollutants. And if we see that that is likely, we can redesignate areas. In fact, we are obliged to redesignate areas if we feel the levels of the pollutants are creeping back upwards. So the point about the strategy itself is that it is designed to cover the whole borough now, whereas the action plans were around the AQMAs, excuse me. So now the strategy is to cover the whole borough. It could be argued that it's going to improve the protection for residents across the whole borough. In terms of the locations of the monitoring, we can move them around. They are mobile sensors, as has been pointed out. There is obviously a cost associated with that, because we have to connect them to the electrical supply on the lampposts, but also there is a mobile connection for the data. So there are costs associated with it. The other point is that there is no point in moving them around every month or, over short periods of time, because air quality pollutants concentrations will change with the seasons. With different levels of activity, you might get low levels in the summer where the schools are closed and that sort of thing. So really you want to keep them in the location for at least a 12-month period to get a really good picture of what's going on in that location. However, they can be moved if there is a justification. As I said, the locations have been chosen because the science and the guidance and the mapping and screening tells us that they are the areas that are likely to have the highest concentrations. There would be little value in moving them to areas where either there are going to be very low concentrations or the exposure, the levels of exposure are going to be low. So you could have high concentrations, but if there's nobody there, then there's less value in monitoring. So there has to be a robust case, I think, for doing the monitoring, given the limited resources and the associated costs. So again, we're more than happy to have conversations about alternative locations where they could be greater value, and more than happy to have those conversations with members about that. I think there was one point about open fires. I'm not sure if that was open fires in relation to domestic settings or just open fires, bonfires and such like. I did mention the clean air, that we're going to look at the possibility of expanding our smoke control areas. In addition to that, we do have powers under statutory nuisance legislation, which are sort of reactive powers. So if somebody is burning something they shouldn't be, if it's creating black smoke, if it's causing a nuisance or it's prejudicial to health, the council can intervene and issue abatement notices. And in fact, where there is a statutory nuisance, the council is obliged to do that. So an environmental health officer is very experienced in dealing with statutory nuisance and able to recognise that quite easily. So we do have other more sort of immediate and reactive powers to deal with pollution incidents that are happening there and then.
Thank you very much. With regard to the movement or sending this over to the other panel, I think I'd like to hear if before we make a decision from other panel members. But my sense in this is that we're going to have a complete and robust conversation and scrutiny here, and the other panels have limited time as well. I know we've found difficulty in fitting in all of the work programme within only our own space. So I'm very conscious that that would be the same for them. So at the moment, I'm erring on the side that we should actually just do a complete and robust scrutiny here, and there's no need to actually send it over to the other panel for them to also do the same. But obviously, I'm happy and open to hear from other panel members anyway on that point, and I have made note, Councillor Taylor, about your support for it to be moved across, and we'll conclude that, and at the end of the discussion, whether it will move over or not, if we feel that we've had a complete and robust scrutiny here. So Councillor Carpenter, I think I would like to hand over to you for your questions.
Very much. So thank you very much for the report. So while we welcome sustained compliance with national air quality objectives, we've got some concerns about the process and the adequacy of monitoring and strategic direction that we're now pursuing. So I've got a few questions and I couldn't hear all of the answers, so apologies. You might have answered a couple of these, but let's see. So first of all, the AQMS seems to have been developed after the decision to revoke all the AQMAs. So I thought that we had to have a public consultation for that to take place. It says under the national guidance, authorities should consult relevant stakeholders on proposals to revoke an AQMA, including residents, businesses, elected members and health partners. I don't believe that was done. I mean, I know it was presented in cabinet, but I don't believe that constitutes a public consultation. So if that's my question about, why didn't we carry out a public consultation? And then I've also got a point about it should be seen, also discussed in what was previously called the people overview and scrutiny, adult, children and health, I think it's now called, because they rejected this. Obviously the revised version has been adopted a year later, but with no scrutiny or reference to that beyond the cabinet. So I think it should also be heard at that other overview and scrutiny panel because they discussed it last year. And I think a lot of my comments have already been covered about legal obligations to revoke AQMAs. I think Andrew Hill already brought that up. I think the new strategy is a bit vague. It lacks specific measures for former AQMA areas. It lacks funding detail. It lacks timelines or performance indicators, and lacks adoption of the WHO air quality guidelines, which I know Dave mentioned as well. So also, in terms of planning, I think there's an impact there because there's no location-specific actions for sort of the high-risk developments such as AL21, the golf course, the A308 corridor, that sort of thing. So there's no references to expected outcomes or metrics to measure the progress on those. So I think that would be something that would be useful in this document. And also, how do we intend to ensure developers still deliver air quality mitigations without the statutory basis provided by the AQMAs? That's also something that I wanted to ask. So I think I've got quite a few other questions, but they're the most important ones I think that I'd like to discuss today. Thanks.
Rhiannon or Amanda, yeah, if you could cover those.
Yeah, happy to come back on a couple of those, and then I can pass over to Rhiannon. With regard to the World Health Organization levels, the UK has not adopted those. So although that is something that we could choose to do as a local authority, we haven't chosen to do that. And I think that is something that can be considered when we review the strategy, if that is something that we want to do. We've got to be very clear about what we're trying to achieve and how we're going to do that, though. But that is not a requirement on us as a local authority. The standards are set out by the government with regard to the current air quality standards in the UK. The measurement will be NOx and PM10, isn't it?
Yeah, they're the local.
Those are what we're measuring in terms of the air quality. And as Rhiannon said, that is, we've got the strategy, but we also have to do the annual review of our air quality, which is where all the detail about the measurements will be. And as Rhiannon said, that's going to be published in the next few weeks for the update for this year. The consultation side of things, I'm going to have to come to Rhiannon, but I know we looked at everything with regard to it. I know we've had a response from DEFRA for the last couple of years when we've done our status reports that we need to be looking at revoking those AQMAs. So we've been asked to do that by DEFRA. So that is something, but I'm happy to take away all the relevant sections which have been given to us to give you a full response of that. I'm not the subject matter expert, unfortunately, and I don't want to quote something and then get it wrong. So I'd like to take that away if I can and do a proper full response on that. All right, pass to Rhiannon.
To consider removal of the AQMAs, and in the technical guidance it does say that there should be no designated AQMAs for air where the pollutants have been where the objectives have been met rather for 7 years or more, and we have met for 7 years or more in some of those
Sorry, Rhiannon, can I just ask you to pause your thought just for a second, just because I want to make sure that particularly the panel member that asked the questions can hear what's going on. So if we could just pause for a minute whilst we do that. I just asked them to pause to make sure. I think if we just put the mic closer to you.
Apologies.
Rhiannon.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
I think... sorry. It's probably I'm not close enough. Apologies. So yeah, that's on the consultation issue. In terms of
Sorry, did you hear? Sorry, Councillor Carpenter, did you hear the response about the consultation? Okay, could you go over that one more time, please?
We will take as Amanda said, we will take that away. But I was just repeating the point that DEFRA in the last air quality status report recommended that the council consider the removal of the AQMAs, and the technical guidance talks about the 7-year threshold, that there should be no designated areas when the objectives are met for 7 years or more. So, but we will certainly take away the question about the consultation and just be doubly sure. In terms of the performance indicators, I think the problem we had in writing the strategy is that some of the key measures are still in development that impact air quality, including the transport plan, etc. The performance indicators are really set by the regulations which set the objectives. So we've met those, The World Health Organization levels, as Amanda said, have not been adopted, and it wasn't felt in drafting the strategy that they were appropriate at this stage. I think primarily because it'd be very difficult to meet them. And to my knowledge, and I'm happy to be corrected on this, I'm not aware of other local authorities adopting those, but if they exist, I'd be very interested to know about their experience of trying to achieve them. There's not to say they can't be adopted in the future, of course, but I think it was felt that it was inappropriate at this stage to do that. I'm happy to accept that there is perhaps a lack of performance indicators and performance measures in the strategy, which we can, of course, work on and also work on how we're going to report back to this panel and cabinet about progress in delivering the strategy. I'm so happy to take recommendations and areas for improvement on that.
Does that answer your questions? Okay, Councillor Taylor.
Hi, thank you. Just backtracking a little bit to Councillor Da Costa, and I was having a quick check with Simon as well. Because we've redefined people and place, and this now sits on place, because what causes that is place and the effect that has is people. The Health and Wellbeing Board, which is starting to do the work, the representative for the people is the chair on that board, and our representative on that board is Councillor Jack Douglas. So I think maybe we need to have a bit of a think about how all the information comes back to the right ONS panel, so that everybody has all the information and people can have their input into it as well. Because I think otherwise we're banking on everybody watching 3 sets of meetings to try and catch up with what we need to see the larger picture. So maybe now we've made this change, we just might need to think about a better mechanism to bring it all together, so that, you know, everyone has a chance to have that input, whether it's a slightly different working group that's cross-panel maybe, I don't know, but I think we just might need to have a look at that, because this is going to come up more often, I think, where things cross over with the panels. I just wanted to pop that out there, sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Singh?
I do tend to agree with Councillor Taylor on that. This is a very important area of scrutiny. I mean, scrutiny panels do have the option to call in these cabinet decisions and should be monitoring this sort of stuff with their forward plans. But yeah, given the changes that have been made with the panels, I think Rihanna, it'd be important to have some sort of communication, I suppose. And I don't know whether you could do a wider piece, communicate with the general public about what's happening with these AQMAs and AQMAS, and because there is a bit of a, I mean, I was a bit confused because I thought, oh, you're getting rid of them, and then you're not getting rid of them, and you said there's wake and watch. I said, is there going to be wake and watch, or is there going to be a monitoring system? But there is. So in fact, it's what we're doing, rather than taking the monitoring away, we're actually expanding it across the whole borough. So we've now got the ability, given the limited resources, we can check and target areas where we're concerned, which is good. I see the trajectories going down in the DEFRA guidance, and they're the experts, so I'm happy with that. Just on a separate note regarding the smoke control areas, I have got some experience with that, because I did have a resident who complained about this sort of smokeless or not smokeless, the smoked fuel. And when I was engaging with officers, I did find out we've got an AQ, a smoke-free area in Windsor town centre. And that's probably why they've got less pollutants out there near them with their Maidenhead. I don't know, maybe. But it'd be good to have a look at that. And I appreciate that you're doing the borough-wide plan on that, because Maidenhead Town Centre is a very dense area, and would it help with our air quality if we had a smoke-free area, given all the you know, the sort of, you know, the taller buildings around town centre that we've got now around here now. We haven't got terraced Victorian housing anymore, so it is a change. So I'd welcome having a look at that, and see if we can have a smoke-free area in Maidenhead. That would help, I think. But there is a difference between the obviously more rural areas, you know, where obviously they probably do use alternative fuel sources. So yeah, that's good work there. The only other thing I was going to say, the monitoring remained. Will there be any sort of like live data or information that we can pick up? You know, like not only councillors but residents can, you know, plug into our website and, you know, just have a look at where we sit in certain areas, just to make sure we are below the danger zone, I suppose. Thank you.
Yes, so yeah, this point around the smoke control areas, yeah, we would be looking at whether it's appropriate to expand it to cover the whole borough. Reading have done this recently, so we will need to look at their experience. We have to consider about the enforceability of it. We don't want to go around creating regulation for regulation's sake and imposing restrictions on, you know, on ordinary residents, particularly if it results in them having to buy expensive new devices and things like this. So we just need to take all that into consideration, but certainly is something that we intend to explore as part of the strategy. In terms of the live data, my understanding, and I can get the details on it, is that some of the data, the continuous monitoring data, is provided on a website, UKA, I think it is, and that's a sort of national air quality monitoring database. So that live data can help people who have specific vulnerabilities, particularly to pollutants, asthmatics, people with cardiopulmonary disease and other such vulnerabilities, can monitor that data and they can act accordingly, basically. I think there probably is an argument for us doing a little bit more on the website around the promotion of the availability of the data so people can make informed choices and things like that, and that could form part of what we do as well. So yeah, but I can get the details and share the links and whatever after the meeting.
Thank you.
I don't want people to be confused. The air quality management areas, and I'm just repeating what Rhiannon said. When we had those, because we didn't meet the air quality standards, there was a requirement on us as a local authority to do something about it. And it focused very heavily on those areas because those were our worst areas. The new strategy focuses on the whole borough. So I think this is an improvement. You know, we're looking much wider. We're looking at how that is affecting our wider communities. And I just wanted to clarify, having air quality management areas didn't give us any extra enforcement powers or anything like that. It put the onus on us to do something about our air quality. So the fact that we don't have the AQMAs, which we could put back in if our data tells us actually we're going to have a problem in an area, it didn't give us anything better to deal with the air quality. It just focused our actions onto those specific areas. So this is a positive thing. We've got better air quality, we're meeting the standards, but we're also looking much wider and much broader across the borough now to make changes in a much wider sense. So I just wanted to try and clarify that you're not really losing anything by not having the AQMAs. We will come back on the consultation and what we should and shouldn't be doing. Just had a quick look to try and to answer that specific query, but we've actually got actual data, and I think there is some slightly different guidance and talks about where you're predicting that you're going to meet it. Well, we're not predicting, we know we've met it, and we've met it for over 7 years in some areas. So that's where, when we know that we've got it and we're not just predicting it, then it's not so much of a flexible choice. If we were just predicting it, then we don't have to revoke, but we're not. We've got actual data here. And we've got data across the borough now, and I think that is a very positive thing. We can always improve things, and I'm really happy. I didn't come back to the point about some information that you'd sent over. Really happy to make contact and receive that and have further conversations. We've got the ability to amend the strategy as we go forward. It will develop with how we are developing in the borough and all of these other strategies, because there are so many strategies, as you've heard and Rhian's mentioned, and of course the health and wellbeing one as well. So it isn't a strategy which is just going to sit there for the next 6 years and we won't look at it. We will be continually looking at this strategy. We have to do that status report on an annual basis. So it is something that we are clearly going to be keeping an eye on as to where we might have further issues in the future, and obviously developing any further guidance which comes out as well on air quality. Things are developing all the time. Thank you.
Councillor Werner.
Thank you very much. From a policy point of view, and obviously that's what I'm here for policy. I mean, this administration, reducing pollution is really important to us. And if we don't, this will have devastating consequences for many of our residents of the borough. Yes, I think it was rejected last year, quite rightly. We rejected it at Cabinet because there was no new strategy in place. We were getting rid of the AQMAs, but not replacing it with anything immediately. And that gap in pollution monitoring was just unacceptable to us. So that's why that happened last year. But I think what people must understand is this strategy is better monitoring all over the borough, rather than just in the historic locations where we did have a problem, and not just nitrous oxide, but PM10, PM2.5 as well. And just to highlight the dangers to our residents of PM2.5, this refers to a particle in the air with a diameter of 2.5, I'm reading this, 2.5 micrometers or less. And these teeny particles, they can actually get into your lungs and bloodstream and cause enormous damage. And there really is clear evidence of the significant impact on human health, including people dying young, allergies and heart disease. For instance, a friend of mine has asthma. In Maidenhead, it's not too bad. She has an occasional puff. She's fine. She can live a normal life. She goes to some areas of London. Well, she can't go to some areas of London. It's just put London out of bounds in her life. And this strategy isn't just about monitoring, it's also about taking action. You know, there's a list in the strategy, if you read it, of all the actions we're taking. And then I'm sure there's more that can be suggested. And I suppose one of the things I was hoping to come out of this meeting was some more ideas on further actions we can take, but perhaps email them through. It is a national government responsibility, particularly PM2.5, but I think it's really important that as a council we really take action on it. And I'm keen to see what else we can do within the confines that the government allow us and our finances allow us. So I'm really happy with the decision we made at the Cabinet. It's improving pollution monitoring, it's improving pollution monitoring coverage, it's improving monitoring of different particles, and it's improved pollution action to actually deal with it. So I fail to understand why anybody would be against it, to be honest. I think it's a great move. Thank you.
Dave, the only thing is that we've given you the 3 minutes already previously. So rather than even, I mean, we have no. We have 15 minutes. I can. We have 15 minutes remaining. If it's a very quick question, I'll allow it. It has to be very quick.
Thank you very much. It's not a question, it's just a statement. You were asking, Amanda, if any councils had adopted the WHO emission levels, and the answer is yes, but not many. Hackney has. I don't know of any others. Okay. So, Simon, you know, it could be that you should say we should be striving towards these or something like that. Yeah. Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, thank you for the contribution. So I've also been considering about about sending it over to the other panel. There's a couple of constitution things that we have to take into account. So it is quite clear under the Constitution A 7.7 that if something comes before ONS panel, then the other panel, it's and I can quote, the overview and scrutiny panel will not consider matters which have already been considered and determined by an overview and scrutiny panel and within the preceding 6 months. So we won't be referring it to the other panel. Also had thought about that as well. When you look at actually within the strategy, what we're actually putting into the strategy is a lot of the things like the local transport plan and a lot of the actual contributors to the air particulates is actually falls under the place remit as well. So it did actually, after the realignment of the remits for the panels, it does actually fall within our panel to conduct the overview and scrutiny of this. My main concern has been around, obviously with AQMAs, it gives us evidence, and I know you've talked about, obviously it's shown us evidence that it's going down in those areas. The one thought is around schools and, you know, whether actually we have actually done enough to monitor that. And within the strategy, that we should be really clear that we have to do monitoring. There's no point just putting a strategy if we don't go back and revisit it and re-monitor it. And I think we need to make sure that that is part of our strategy, that we have to come back and actually, when we remove these AQMAs, that we can actually come back and actually retest and bring report on our annual report, because we have to produce an annual report out of the strategy, that there's some way of measuring it. It's great to be able to say that, okay, we've implemented the local transport policies or plans, we're seeing more active travel, and a lot of that will obviously naturally contribute towards the reduction in these particulates. But we're also doing things such as we're increasing the encouragement for EV cars. But with EV cars, a lot of them, and I know there's certain brands as well that are very heavy because of the batteries, they actually are causing more 2.5 particulates. And so there's this kind of counter impact of saying, look, within the environment and protecting the climate in the climate strategy, which you listed as one of the things within this strategy, it actually will have an impact on the particulates and the air quality as well. And I think we can't just think that that will deliver us a cleaner environment. We need to go back and we need more research on how that's going to impact it. When we have a much greater uptake of electronic vehicles, I think we have to have within the strategy that we have to revisit the testing, because we don't know whether that's going to actually take us back up. And I think that I would like to put that forward, that actually gets considered as part of like the strategy, that there's a period of visiting it back again, particularly because of the adoption of some of these plans that are supposed to reduce it.
The monitoring remains in the areas where the air quality management areas, the continuous monitoring stations are in the areas of the former air quality management areas. So the monitoring continues in those locations. As we've said, we can, anything's possible in terms of monitoring. It's just about sort of cost benefit analysis, obviously, and everything's subject to relevant spend control requirements and all of the rest of it. So, but also the time of the officers, because air quality is one small part of what the environmental protection team does. And it includes a lot of other matters, and they also support other areas of environmental health as well, and licensing and trading standards and such like. So it has to be looked at in that context. In terms of the PM 2.5, yeah, absolutely take your point on that. We do have background data from DEFRA on PM 2.5 for the borough, and it's way below objectives. However, it would be very interesting to see how the uptake in electric vehicles contributes to an increase. The reality is that the PM 2.5 is a national target because the levels are impacted so heavily from stuff that's happening further away, and I guess it makes logical sense that the smaller, lighter particles will travel further and have an impact on a much wider area. So I think we have to bear in mind that there might be some partnership working required with other local authorities in the area if we really want to tackle this problem in the long term. In relation to schools, I mean, again, monitoring, anything's possible in terms of monitoring. The likely exposure, certainly in terms of nitrogen dioxide, is likely to be on the walk to school, I would suggest, which I think somebody mentioned earlier on. The levels, the further away from the source with NOx, the much more diffuse the pollutant is. So you're more likely to be exposed on your route into school, I would suggest, than you are in school. But I agree it would be an interesting thing to look at, the levels of exposure in the school environment throughout the day.
I mean, if I use an example, so within our own ward, we have 4 schools that you could almost throw a blanket over. And the amount of traffic that we experience around Cox Green, going to Manor Green and Cox Green School, they bring people in by coach, which is good that they're actually using coaches, because then it's, you know, less polluting rather than having cars. Wessex Way, and which is where this school street was done, and also Lowbrook School as well. And a lot of people do, because Lowbrook School is so highly rated in the country, people get into the school and then move out of the area and drive, you know, and we have a huge impact, and nowhere around there has that been tested. And you know, I think, yes, we've selected those 5 AQM8s for good reason, and it's great to see that data. But I really do think we need to look around areas with high concentration of schools, because that's where we should be protecting children and around their health. And I think that's just not covered within this. And I think it needs more thought. And the Cabinet, I would put forward a suggestion that the Cabinet have to think more about the possibility of not just keeping them in the same location, but to actually move them to somewhere else, so that then we can actually collect some additional information and data. And then obviously around revisiting it around EV. So as that increases, particularly around when we have high density of EV charging, you know, there's obviously going to be a lot of EV traffic, that we should maybe think about that as a criteria as well within our strategy. The other thing is the planning policy, which I know has been mentioned previously, and then Councillor Singh brought it up, and I want to revisit that, is that I think that it talks about local planning policy, and it mentions it briefly, and it's like almost like a one-word mention, in the fact that it says that within our policy QP3, that the development has no unacceptable effect on the amenities enjoyed by occupants of the adjoining properties. And then it says pollution, amongst lots of other things. And what I do feel is that we haven't answered in this about how to drive the strategy around putting more pressure on developers to actually use sustainable vehicles in their construction traffic. And that is where we need to apply more pressure on these developers, because that industry is not moving forward fast enough in actually the use, and they are available electric construction vehicles, and just the uptake is just not being done. And we need to be seen to actually put more pressure on them around it. And I just don't see in this policy at the moment that it just refers to national policies and are already existing, like a borough local plan. But we need to add to that and give more strength to actually the thoughts around when they have transport plans, that it has to consider the air quality. So I'd like to get your feedback on those suggestions, please.
Yeah, I think on some of the planning issues, we will have to talk to planning colleagues. So there is the planning, let me get the actual title of the document correct. Air quality assessment guidance note, which was approved at the cabinet meeting where the decision to revoke the AQMAs was reached. And that is designed to, I think, put some flesh on the bones of the requirements around air quality, to set the criteria about development. And I will have to defer to my planning colleagues and come back with some more detail on the issue around the vehicles specifically, because I'm not sure to what extent it covers that issue, and it would be something I'd need to take further advice on. Certainly in the schools, more than happy to ask my environmental protection team to talk to yourself or anybody who wants to talk about air quality monitoring in schools and how that might be something that we could, or in areas where there are high concentrations of schools, rather, how that's something we can achieve with our existing air quality monitoring equipment, or, you know, obviously the purchase of more would be subject to all the usual business cases, but that's something we can certainly look at, definitely.
I mean, I don't know if it's just because you have the data that's saying that you're going to revoke them, you know, to the actual AQMAs, the official AQMAs. But within the strategy, I totally get it's greater and wider than just the AQMAs. We're adopting, and it's actually driven us to adopt a strategy. And I think that's a really good thing that it's wider. I just think we should be utilising those resources that we have to then actually look into other areas like the high density of schools, for example, which this hasn't done yet, and we haven't achieved that yet. And I think we should look at that. We don't, like you say, we're revoking it from those areas, so let's maybe consider moving them into areas where it potentially will have the greater impact on air quality. And it's really important for our children. Where did the children spend most of their time? At schools and in travel to schools as well. So I think that if, like you said, you can please look into that and actually take that further and consider that also with the cabinet. I understand you mentioned about obviously this, the air quality assessment guidance note, which is mentioned under planning, and that's been produced to provide developers with advice on considering air quality. I mean, giving advice to consider is not strong enough in my books. I'm sorry, you have to do more than that. And so we need to look at how we can actually do that and get greater weight on them having to do that. Plus also, if we're going to scrutinize things and we have something like that, I'd like to see it, and actually have access to it as part of it. Should have been, you know, when we're referring to a guidance note or something that, you know, is really important around how we're going to support this, it would have been good to see it as an appendix. It's not there. And it's come before us, and there are other items, you know, there was the air quality data document, but something like this, it's actually quite important that we see it as a scrutiny panel, because it informs. I wouldn't have maybe asked this question because I would have known what you were trying to guide us towards, or guide the developers towards. And guidance for developers, I can tell you in experience, they really don't pay it much lip service. It's guidance, and we need to find something a bit stronger around that. So I'd like that to be also considered when it goes before cabinet as well, how we can actually give more weight to that guidance.
Technical guidance published by DEFRA, and it's based on historic data and screening, etc., about and it's you know, scientifically robust evidence about where the most appropriate locations should be, and they are in the places where they are deemed to be the highest risk, and that they were of course the areas of the AQMA. So there is technical guidance that we have to follow as well in putting them in those locations. So I think we just have to bear that in mind. I take your point about the planning document. I think because this has happened all at kind of the same time, it probably didn't feature in the original draft, but I accept we can make that an appendix, we can revise it and add it in. The data, the status report was literally finalised in the last, I think I got it from the team on Friday maybe. So the timeline was tight for that, but certainly I accept that it would have been very helpful for everyone to have seen that detailed data. So maybe it's just a timing issue that we need to consider for future meetings.
I think we don't have any more panel members with questions related to this. Okay. We do obviously have the opportunity, and we will be bringing it back to us on the actual application of this strategy. And we will be actually, my plan is that we should be bringing this back. I know we've got 6 months, so you've got 6 months. But I do think that once the strategy is in place, we do need to revisit it, and we do need to actually make sure that it's having an effect and that those measures are being met. So I appreciate all the time that you've put and staying with us this late. Thank you, panel members, as well, for all the robust conversation and scrutiny. I think we have one more, which is the last item was the work programme. As part of that, I know that we've been approached separately, right, Mark, about adding an additional meeting in July. Councillor Taylor's shaking her head. I don't know if that's, I don't want to have one, or I haven't been approached.
No. Sandwich between council and planning, so that's a lot.
Yeah, I fully appreciate that. We tried to explore alternative dates, but trying to find a free date for the two planning policy documents before Cabinet on the 22nd meant that was the only option we could do, really. But I appreciate it's going to be a really busy week for some councillors, unfortunately.
Yeah. But I do think that, you know, obviously it's the parking SPD, which we asked specifically to bring before the panel. And we want to be able to do it before Cabinet so that we push through any suggestions and any recommendations before Cabinet. And the Ascot SPD as well will be the 2 items on that for our work programme. On that, thank you very much, and thank you for your time. See you at the next one. Take care. Thanks.